At the top. At the bottom, it isn't quite the same. Even for those on the rise, there's not an awful lot of cash in the boxing world, and if you're just starting out, well, it can be a very costly exercise indeed. But don't take my word for it. Here's the former European champion talkSPORT's Spencer Oliver.
You're turning professional and you're boxing, let's say, York Hall on a non-televised fight. You have to sell tickets to earn any money, but you have to cover the wages of your opponent as well. So if you don't have the ability to be able to sell enough tickets, you effectively have to pay to fight.
A far cry then from Jake Paul facing Mike Tyson in 2024, when the purse was reported to be around £48 million. But the vast amounts of cash lining the top dog's pockets isn't the norm in a typical fight.
Let's say you're lucky and you get between 5 and 10 grand. You're going to get 10 grand max for that. 10% goes to the trainer, 25% goes to the manager. Then we've got the tax man to pay as well. So we're cutting that money in at least half. So now you've got 5 grand for a 10-week camp. So you're talking about a guy here earning, he might be clearing 500 quid a week. How do you support a family on that? So boxers chase the dream. And, you know, there's probably 2% of them that actually make it.
So say you do make it and you start to rise up the ranks. Strikers Boxing, a training academy, says the mid-tier fighters can earn more, somewhere between £10,000 and £50,000 a fight, depending on record, profile, opponent and popularity of weight class. It's only at the top level does the real cash start flowing in, with the top-tier professionals, i.e. those going for titles, earning 6 figures a fight. Something else you'll have heard of is the terms prize fighter or journeyman. A prize fighter is, as it sounds, someone who picks up fights where they can and gets a nice big check if they win. Journeymen are the fighters who take on up-and-comers, effectively used for experience in the ring. Even if they're going up against a real prospect, a young Anthony Joshua, for example, these guys will be lucky to earn more than 10 grand. So the average boxer isn't as rich as you'd think.
Yeah, good evening one, good evening all, and welcome to your Sunday night fix of European football, Trans-Europe Express here on talkSPORT with me, Danny Kelly, and the returning hero, Andy Brassell. Back last week, now almost mundane that he's here with us again. Sorry to drag you away from the Winter Olympics, now being absolutely dominated by Britain's team. Soon we'll be overtaking Lars Sivertsen's Norway in the gold medal table. We've got a great show for you, and therefore you can record the TV. All the major stories from across the continent, of course. The incredible arrival of Igor Tudor out of nowhere at Spurs. The chaos at Marseille this week. Champions League playoff previews. We'll also have a quick look at those in the other 2 European tournaments. Mbappe watch. Daniele Fisichella, Italian football expert, will join us. Tim Vickery will be with us from South America. It's going to be an absolute bouncing ball of excitement through the next 3 hours. Welcome one, like I say. Welcome every one of you to Trans-Europe Express. Evening, Andy.
Very well, Danny. How are you?
Very, very good indeed. Very good to hear you again. And to see you, of course, on the screen these days. You can see us on, on YouTube and all the usual places now to talkSPORT broadcast. And I have to say, Andy and I do bring a particular glamour to the station. Andy, before we do our first story, very quickly, games going on in Spain and in France and in Italy. Tell us what the scores are.
Yeah, the big ones. Napoli 1, Roma 1. Of course, we're about a quarter of an hour into the second half in that. Early goal for Daniel Marlon to give Roma the lead. Equaliser by Leonardo Spinazzola against his former club. Napoli have been the dominant team in the second half so far. A few minutes behind in Lyon 1, Nice 0. Nice really dominated the first half, but Corentin Tolisso, the returning captain, scored for Lyon on the cusp of the break. And in Spain, Mallorca 0, Betis 2, which could be putting a bit of pressure on Atletico Madrid after they've had their little wobble recently. Ez Abde and Bakambu with goals.
Thank you very much indeed. Lyon, of course, going for their umpteenth win in succession if that result holds. OK, the big story in European football involves a team in the relegation battle in the Premier League. Spurs, having disposed of Thomas Frank, searched around a bit and came up with the name of Igor Tudor. Really, I mean, I have a Spurs podcast, as you know. His name did not come up in the Runners and Riders, but there he is now. The former Marseille, Galatasaray and Juventus manager is in charge of Spurs for the next critical 12 games in the Premier League and, of course, as they head towards winning the Champions League. So help us try and understand what this is all about and what Igor will bring to North London. I'm delighted to say we're joined by our Italian football expert, as so often here on Trans-Europe Express, Daniele Fisichella. Good evening, Daniele.
Good evening, Danny. Good evening, Andy.
Hello.
Listen, is this a completely left field appointment by Spurs, Daniele?
Well, if you consider that Tudor has got a pedigree of coming midway through the season and saving teams, he's already done it 7 times in his career. He's a sort of Winston Wolfe from Pulp Fiction. He comes in and he solves the problems. In Italy, they call him the ferryman, the traghettatore, because he's somebody who can steady the ship, is in rough waters, and take you to the end of the season. But of course, his CV speaks of many accomplished projects when he had to manage the team, such as Lazio, Juventus, Verona, also his experience in Turkey for 7, 8, 9 games. When it comes to establishing a project long term, he's only done it once, really, at Marseille, successfully. But then you wonder, is he the man to take Spurs further on into the future?
I guess this is the thing, Daniele, that the fact that it can't be about the long term for Spurs at the moment. They've got a very immediate problem. And in that sense, Tudor is as good as it gets, isn't he? Because I think for this particular situation, if we think of him taking over at Lazio in March, if we think of him taking over at Juventus in March, the thing that I was always concerned about with Juventus, especially seeing him at close quarters at Galatasaray and Marseille, and knowing the very intense football that he likes to play, I always thought, how are you going to do this mid-season? And I think that particularly applies for Spurs, because whereas Juventus, for example, I think it's a fairly good comparison. They're playing quite pedestrian football under Thiago Motta. And then you get a coach coming in who says, I want you to press, I want you to attack, I want you to be aggressive. You wonder if the players are fit enough. And I guess you could say that moving from Frank to Tudor, but he's managed that this time last year pretty much, hasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And Juventus under Tudor improved, only lost 1 game of those 9 last season that he managed, and they managed to qualify for the Champions League. They started scoring more goals, they were more aggressive, the players simply bought into it and started winning more duels across the pitch, which is the cornerstone of Tudor philosophy. The same at Lazio the year before, 9 games in charge, only 1 loss, and they qualified for the Europa League, which was as good as it could have got, really. He couldn't have taken any further. But when it comes to Tudor philosophy, I think the fact that Spurs are already quite adept and already quite keen at pressing high, then obviously is a different story that they cannot quite convert high turnovers into shots or chances. I think perhaps makes Tudor system slightly easier to adapt, and Spurs seems to set up to play with a sort of back 3 and then wing backs, of course, as soon as they get back all the best players from injury. You said it right, Andy. It's all about intensity for Tudor. It's all about having that ferocious drive to win the ball up the pitch. And he's a man that doesn't make many compromises. And in this regard, is more in the mold of Antonio Conte, which probably was going to send a shiver to the spine of Danny Kelly. But he's been molded into that idea as well as same as Giampiero Gasperini. That intensity is the key.
I mean, in some ways, Daniele, it's quite I don't say it's a simple task for Igor, but it is a very clear one. He's got to win 3 or 4 games to make sure they don't get relegated. And he has to do it at the moment with exactly 11 fit or available outfield players, because Romero still has 3 games to serve in his suspension. And I'm not exaggerating there. If anybody outside of that 11 was to come into the team, they would be making their Premier League debut. He literally has... he only has one decision to make. Does he play his old mate Kolo Muani or Matisse Tell up front? But everybody else picks themselves.
Yeah, and in this regard, I think the task is much simpler. And Tudor is somebody that he will adapt. He knows that the situation is difficult, and he knows to need to achieve the result. Then, of course, we are left wondering what is the end result this season for Tottenham. Getting saved, I think he's more than capable of doing that. The run in the Champions League, where coincidentally he could face Juventus in the round of 16. So
hilarious.
That would be interesting as well. But I think, when it comes to the personnel, you mentioned rightly Kolo Muani. It is somebody that Tudor likes, and the fact that Juventus last season couldn't get hold of him with a permanent deal was probably part of the reason why in the end he grew the discontent. And the second spell at Juventus was perhaps unlucky, because Juventus had injuries in key personnel, namely Bremer, had a very difficult run of fixtures. They played the 3 most difficult Champions League fixtures right at the beginning, winning none of them, but of course also showed the vulnerability of Tudor in terms of his communication. Sometimes he came out honest, perhaps too honest, saying that Juventus were not good enough and they were not strengthened enough in the transfer market, so perhaps letting too much away. And in the end, he was also tactically confused, and that probably was his downfall, and something that he doesn't have to repeat at Spurs. With Juve, he changed the formation far too many times and couldn't make the most of the most talented player they had at their disposal, which was Kenan Yildiz, and that's why in the end, the Juventus management thought the problem was him, not the players. And as to be said, Juventus results have improved since he departed.
Does he speak English? Does he speak good English?
Yes, I believe he does. He's been in Italy for a long time, but coming from Croatia, I think he's quite of a polyglot. If you remember, other managers, the like, for example, Slaven Bilic, had a very good English. Yes, of course, he played in England, but he had no problem in communicating. No, it is a player that even at Juventus, with the many foreigners, was quite keen at speaking English. Yes, he has lived most of his life in Italy, but I think he's in that regard, there should be no problem.
What about his personality? My remembrance of him as a player for the likes of Juventus, when he played in that amazing team with Zidane, etc. But also when he was playing for Croatia, was that he was as hard as nails and something of a brick wall of a man. Because that Spurs dressing room, if half the stories coming out of it since Thomas Frank's departure are true, somebody's got to go in there and say to people like the captain, right, you need to shut up for 3 months and play the game. How do you think he'll deal with what appears to be both a very sad and slightly rebellious dressing room?
He's quite an uncompromising man, and the charisma that he carried on the pitch when he played for Croatia, Juventus, is the same that he has on the touchline as a manager. One of his favorite quotes from his time at Marseille was, "If you don't run, you don't play." And in fact, Marseille best player, Dimitri Payet, back then, didn't play many games under him because he was not doing much running. So he won't really compromise with any misbehavior of somebody that is not quite towing the line. But on the other hand, he's an experienced manager, 47 years old, and he has already had over 10 managerial experience in different countries as well. He will know how to strike a chord with different players as well, and he will understand straight away the gravity of the situation where he steps in. Look, he's a very intense man, and that I can conclude by telling you an anecdote. Last season, when Juventus called him, he was in Split, and he decided to jump in his car, drive all the way from Split to Turin, just to say yes. Now, I hope he was closer to London when the Spurs get him a call, but that tells you the drive of the man man and the passion and the commitment. And I think you will get it from him straight away from the very first training session. But of course, he will establish the rules and he will want the players to follow them.
While we've got you there, Daniele, quick word on the Champions League race in Serie A. Big moment in Naples. Foul by Buongiorno on Wesley as he made a run in the left. It's a penalty to Roma. Napoli won, Roma won. And talking of a previous Spurs manager, this could have huge repercussions for Antonio Conte,
who's already been knocked out from the Coppa Italia this week by Como, so Napoli out of the Champions League as well, and they almost seems in free fall. That's, of course, a season plagued by injuries, lots of players out. Tonight, for example, McTominay is not playing, but Napoli season is derailing, and Conte was very keen to remind everyone during the week that yes, he has already won a title, albeit that being the Italian Super Cup. So obviously, we know sometimes how these things gonna end.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, I've actually seen it in action, but without the trophy,
Yeah.
I actually, since he stopped being Spurs manager, I've got less angry about Antonio Conte. we're all human beings, aren't we, at the end of the day? But there was a time, and you will confirm on my podcast, I was threatened to go and burn his car. Not with him in it, obviously. I was so upset with the way he was carrying on at Spurs, particularly in that Champions League game. You'll remember it, Daniele, against Milan, where Spurs had to come back from behind, and he brought on a load of defensive substitutes. And Andy, tell us about the outcome of that penalty.
I will when it happens. Both players who
I can tell you now they've scored.
No, that's Lyon 2, Nice 0. Noah Nate with his second goal since arriving from Danish football into French football, putting Lyon 2-0 up there. Great assist by Pavel Schulz, his second of the evening. Is Marlon against Vanja Milinkovic-Savic, 71 minutes. Of course, Milinkovic-Savic has saved 3 out of 5 penalties this season. Oh, and he was close to that one, but it's gone in. Marlon scored his second of the night. Napoli won, Roma 2.
Daniel Marlon's in danger of dragging Roma into the Champions League here, isn't he? The way he's started at Roma. Daniele, as always, thank you very, very much indeed with the latest on Igor Tudor. And Spurs fans back in the day will remember Christian Gross arriving with his tube ticket at Spurs. Things have changed because Romano, what's his first name? Fabrizio Romano, the great transfer here we go man, has put a picture up on his X account this evening of Igor Tudor and his agent on a private jet on the way to London, presumably for training tomorrow morning at Spurs. But thanks to Daniele for giving us all the lowdown there on what the Spurs fans and all of us in the Premier League can expect from Igor Tudor. Next, if you think Spurs is a basket case, come on down Marseille.
Thomas Tuchel signing a contract, is it because of the fact that the FA were concerned he was going to go somewhere else?
Listen, I think it is. You know, I certainly think he was on Manchester United's list. Who knows, maybe he would have been on Tottenham's list as well. And I think that's why they had to get this done, because what you don't want, if you're the FA, and if you're an England fan, you don't want Thomas Tuchel going into the World Cup with constant speculation that he could be leaving for a Premier League club job at the end of the tournament. I think getting that out of the way, he can focus on the job in hand. I don't think England will win the World Cup. I think there's a lot that counts against England winning this World Cup.
What happens if we lose in the quarterfinals? Does he continue as England manager?
I think I don't think we should underestimate if he gets to the quarterfinal of a World Cup. When you go back pre-Gareth Southgate, which is your argument, we'd have bitten your hand off at the quarterfinal of a World Cup.
Are you going to defend me on that?
No, I'll defend you because I think Gareth Southgate should have won a European Championship. I think they should have beaten Italy in that final. However, pre-Gareth Southgate, England didn't get to quarterfinals and finals at European Championships. So I don't, and it's a tough draw, by the way. You talk about draws. I was there when the draw was made in Washington. England have got to take out some big hitters to get to a quarterfinal.
So where does he have to get to keep his job done?
I think the quarterfinal is par. I think anything beyond that is
takes us to the Euros.
Success.
Yeah, and somewhat linked to the chaos at Spurs, I guess, is the chaos at Marseille, because Roberto De Zerbi was seen to be in the running both for the temporary and permanent position at Spurs before Igor Tudor was announced for the next 3 months. But Andy, it's been an incredible week in southern France. They got absolutely annihilated last weekend against PSG. Since then, the manager has gone. The sporting director has gone. There's been mass protests by the fans, and the players are under terrible stick as well. Try and talk us through the week for Olympique Marseille.
Yeah, I mean, Danny, I said in the immediate aftermath of this, Jonathan Johnson and I were, French football journalists, were analysing it on the continent on Monday. And this was before De Zerbi was sacked because, of course, De Zerbi left. He wasn't sacked. Yeah. It was the most mutual of mutual decisions. And we both said after that the manner of the defeat in Le Classique was probably too much to overcome, in that Marseille wouldn't get better from De Zerbi leaving, but it would probably happen anyway. And this has been what has happened. It was announced towards midnight on Monday going into Tuesday. And it's been close a couple of times. He's come close to offering his resignation a couple of times in the last couple of months. And we talked about it so many times since he got the job. Intense guy, the most intense of football clubs. And in one way, they click together perfectly. I mean, you'll remember that interview that Jason Burt did with Pablo Longoria, the president of Marseille, recently for The Telegraph, in which Longoria said, I want De Zerbi to be our Diego Simeone. Now, in terms of time, that always seemed a little bit ambitious.
And personality too.
Yeah, exactly. I think the intensity of it was really what did it. I mean, there's a great quote from an insider at Marseille, an anonymous insider at Marseille, off the back of that, saying, we're equally relieved and sad that Roberto's gone. And I think that's probably quite a good way of describing it. Now, I look at that game and the way they went down at PSG, and of course you can lose to PSG. That can happen. I mean, they've only beaten them twice in the league since 2011, for goodness sakes, and we know that QSI have had a huge influence on that. But the issue is with Marseille is that the recruitment's been scattergun. You know, that they turn over such an incredible amount of players at such a high cost, and they've got a very win now squad. You know, there's not a lot of young guys in there on the whole. And you know, you look at the resale value of some of the teams. It's not got an amazing resale value, in fact, which puts them quite in opposition with a lot of French football. You know, I think age-wise, even PSG, if they were in that position, they would be in a better position to sell players and go forward. But it's interesting how the club have briefed a lot since De Zerbi's gone of his relations with the players, various fallouts with the players, how they've found it a little bit too intense, some of the players. And I guess these are all questions that will be put when he's linked with the Tottenham job or the Manchester United job or whatever else. I think Marseille is a very particular environment and they're not strictly relevant. And that very particular environment has claimed another victim, of course, with this morning, Mehdi Benatia, the sporting director, announcing that he's leaving with immediate effect.
Well, that must be, as you say, on the back of probably that recognition that their squad is all over the place for what's required in France. The upshot of this has been a weekend of protest by the Marseille fans against everybody, really, but particularly Frank McCourt, the owner, and the aforementioned president, Pablo Longoria.
Yeah, that's right, Danny. They played Gary O'Neill's Strasbourg yesterday. I'm still getting used to saying Gary O'Neill's Strasbourg, but they're really good as Gary O'Neill's Strasbourg, by the way, as they were again yesterday. There was a mutinous atmosphere, really. A lot of the fans didn't come in at the beginning, sort of boycotted the start of the game in protest. One of the most famous things in French or European football is Marseille coming out to Jump by Van Halen, and people were booing all over it. You look at some of the senior players, and particularly Benjamin Pavard and actually Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, which I think is quite sad because he's someone who's really committed, were booed by the fans as well. Frank McCourt and Longoria were booed. There were banners saying of all their plans going up in smoke and get out of our club, clear off, failure after failure. Emptiness behind the goals as well. And when they went 2-0 up, perhaps they felt that they were going to take a bit of the pressure off. Again, they conceded another late goal. Joachim Panakei, one of Liam Rosinia's favourites, of course, with a late penalty goal, the ultimate pressure penalty that he put past Geronimo Rulli after Rulli had saved Marseille a couple of times. And they're in a situation tonight where if this result holds, we've got 15 minutes to go. Lyon 2, Nice 0. Lyon have had a fraction of the budget, even if Hendrick has rather fallen into their laps. He's not playing this evening. He's suspended, of course. This would mean that Lyon go 5 clear of Marseille, 3rd to 4th place. And that makes a massive difference, as we said, because top 3 qualify automatically for the Champions League in France. 4th have to go through 2 qualifying rounds.
What have they done and what will they be doing about the coaching situation, Andy?
Well, it looks like the short-term fix is going to be Habib Beye, who, of course, used to be the captain of Marseille, so knows the club, etc., etc. Fired by Rennes during the week and replaced by Francaise, who was until recently the head coach of Nice. Look, he didn't do a bad job at Rennes at all, and Beye is a really intelligent guy, got a lot of experience, can deal with high pressure. But having said that, the thing that really undermined him at Rennes was his relationship with some of the key players, notably Brice Samba, with whom he really fell out with, the second choice France goalkeeper. And that was one of the things that pressured Rennes to take the decision to get rid of him in the end. So at the moment, that's not happening, or it's not been finalised because there are still financial issues to be sorted out, mainly because Habib Beye was due a year extra if they qualified for Europe at the end of the season, and he wants that money now, assuming that they're going to make Europe, and Rennes aren't really in a mood to pay. So,
and big goal in southern Italy. Napoli have carved Roma open with a move right through the middle of their defence. I didn't see who got the final shot from the edge of the box. Giovanni, no, I'll get it for you in a second.
It's Alisson Santos, who has just signed, making his league debut at home for them. Massive pylon in the corner of the pitch is 2-2, and they're just getting ready actually to bring Romelu Lukaku on, who of course just easing himself back from injury as they're chasing that goal. It'd be interesting to see if he still comes in, but Alisson, having just signed from Sporting, has made a huge impact with that brilliant goal.
Yeah, nicely constructed by Napoli. I mean, imagine the Roma people will be clutching their heads because there were 4 Napoli players involved there, and none of them, saw even the remote shadow of a tackle or a challenge. But 2-2 with 8 minutes of normal time still to go there in Naples. Let me just change that scoreline. Coming up next, we'll be talking about football in Germany and the latest statistics. They fall like skittles, don't they, to the England captain Harry Kane.
you know, when you walk into Tottenham, what you see everywhere is to dare is to do. It's everywhere. And yet their actions are almost the antithesis of that.
Right.
It's a real curious in terms of understanding what are they trying to build? You know, what are they? Is it... There's obviously, they've built an unbelievable stadium, unbelievable training facilities. But when you look at the expenditure, particularly, you know, in their wages structure, they're not a big club. I saw that because when we were trying to sign players, we weren't in the market for those players.
I was stunned. I was absolutely... I thought it was disgraceful.
Did you?
I thought, honestly, I couldn't believe what I was listening to. The club have given him £7 million. He's blaming everyone but himself.
No, we got him a trophy.
Yes, but for his sacking, he's blaming everyone. But when I sat down on the day of the final, Daniel Levy comes up to me and goes, I've been in 8 semi-finals and final, we all laughed.
Yeah, what's wrong with that? That's his fault.
I don't want to know that. That should be private.
Nah.
The geezer's giving you...
Yeah, let's apply the jeweler's eyepiece now to the goings-on in Germany. Plenty to talk about regarding Bayern Munich, Andy. Not least that Harry Kane scored his 500th and 501st career goals. Also noticeable that he's rattling along again in the Bundesliga. That's his 25th and 26th goals so far this season. Given that very few of these goals were scored outside of the very top divisions in European football, a few while he was on loan at places like Norwich, he just keeps on motoring. He is look, since he's left England, I think we've all come to realise, since the bias against him because he played for Spurs, just what an amazing footballer he is.
Yeah, I think really it was because he wasn't in a Champions League context all the time, and now he is. You know, that has really enabled people to judge him at his true value, and it's almost like a victory lap for him, really, isn't it, playing at Bayern, and a really deserved one. As we've said, I don't just think it's about the goals with him, because he fits Bayern in so many other ways, and they fit him in so many other ways. But this was always coming. Werder Bremen hadn't won for 11 games before this, and they were pretty forgiving opponents. So obviously the first Kane goal, a penalty. The second one, a shot from outside the box when it didn't really look like a shot was on, but he managed to find the angle anyway and put it in off the inside of the post. And these goals have added to his current tally, which is already higher than last season. So as you say, 26 in the Bundesliga, 41 overall for club, if we're looking at Pokal and Champions League as well. His highest for Bayern is 44, which he got in his opening season. So it looks like he's nailed on to beat all those records. The one question, I suppose, is whether he can beat the Robert Lewandowski record, which is 41 in a Bundesliga season. He, in turn, beaten the record by Gerd Müller that no one thought would ever be broken. Now, they asked Vincent Kompany about this afterwards, and he said, look, honestly, I don't care if he breaks the record or not, and I'll tell Harry that to his face, which was very Vincent Kompany, really. But I think, like me, Vincent Kompany thinks that describing Kane in numbers is almost a bit vulgar, really.
It's to underplay him as well. It really does.
There's so much more to him than that.
Yeah, I mean, that's all fantastic for Bayern Munich. Less so, well, I've got good and bad news. Let's do the bad news first. And, of course, any injury to veteran players as the World Cup now starts to really appear on the horizon is to be noted. Emmanuel Neuer out.
Yeah, he went off at half-time yesterday, and Bayern said after the game it was just a precaution. It's turned out to be a bit worse than that. A calf strain that it looks will keep him out for up to a month. That would knock him out potentially of the next round of the Champions League, and certainly the Klassiker with Dortmund at the end of the month, which is huge. Jonas Urbig has looked pretty good decently when he's come in. He's a young deputy and the anointed one going forward. But Neuer reiterated earlier this week that he definitely wouldn't be coming out of international retirement to go to the World Cup anyway. But the other thing we have to say,
so
which
I can
is
stop
good
worrying
news
about that, can I?
Yeah, you can. You can. You won't be carving England up in midfield again in the latter rounds in the States, which is good. But the really good news for Bayern this week is finally they got Dayo Upamecano to put pen to paper. So he's extended his contract to 2030.
Yeah, I mean, just talk to me very quickly about that, Andy, because why has it taken so long? I mean, obviously, Upamecano, they said the deal was agreed a while ago, but it's taken a while to put whatever the German is for pen to paper. The agent has been quite fastidious with this, I believe, and the very calm likes of Uli Hoeneß have been expressing their frustration in public quite a lot. I think the club have dealt with it really well. And of course, I think what's a big part of it, Danny, is Upamecano's been in a great position to extract maximum value. He was out of contract this summer. Bayern always wanted to stick with him. And now I think it puts Ibrahima Konate in a really strong position, because if we go back a month, you had 3 top centre-halves, prime in their peak centre-halves, who are out of contract and available in the summer. Obviously, Real Madrid were interested in all of them. Upamecano, Marc Guéhi and Ibrahima Konate. And now there is but one, which I think puts him in a really, really good position to negotiate whatever he wants with whichever club he wants. Okay, so let's talk then about Dortmund, who are hot on the tail of Bayern Munich. They keep on finding ways to keep up. They won against an informed Mainz side by 4-0 on Friday night, Andy. And first signs of the green shoots of springtime recovery for the previously dormant Sekou Guirassy.
Yeah, and Guirassy has been so reliable since he's been at Dortmund, but it's been difficult for him this season. And really, him and Harry Kane have been propping up the Bundesliga goal-wise since Kane arrived in Germany, coming up 3 years ago. They've been neck and neck for a lot of that time, apart from when Guirassy injured his hamstring. Remember, Guirassy was Champions League top scorer last season as well. And this season, he's just getting himself back into form. So he scored 5 in the last 3, having scored 2 in the 4-0 win against Mainz on Friday night. That's as many as he scored in the last 25, which tells you exactly where the struggle's been. And when you're getting to the end of your 20s, all of a sudden people are talking about moves to Saudi and what might come next and what big financial move he might make for the end of his career. But for him, being back in the Dortmund team and being important again is the main thing for now.
Yeah, and as I say, they nobody could say this has been an outstanding season for Dortmund, but I suppose it's the phrase hanging in there, something like that. Isn't it?
I mean, Danny, all they can do, I think, going into that Klassiker at the end of the month, if they keep it at 6 points, that means it's interesting. And of course, the last couple of weekends, they've gone first as well. So they've been able to close it to 3 points overnight ahead of Bayern playing, which has made it quite interesting. But yeah, if you're going into the Klassiker at 6 points, maybe it's a very short-lived titillation or shadow of a title race. But for the moment, it's quite nice at least having that.
Yeah, let's talk about Bayer Leverkusen. Since their great season, a more up and down time for them as well, particularly this year. I mean, I know we're only 6 weeks into the new year. They haven't been in the greatest form, but they put the hurt on St. Pauli.
Yeah, they have. And St. Pauli got that big win against Stuttgart last week. Leverkusen have been anything but fluent. They haven't created a lot, very much like they were at the start of the season, actually, under Erik ten Hag. And it seemed like they'd done so much to move on from that. Kasper Hjulmand, their coach, had done a lot of good stuff, bringing together really a disparate set of players to create something. But what we've realised as a couple of results have gone against them in recent weeks is it's become abundantly clear that getting to the Champions League means everything to the club, both in terms of prestige and financially. So they're in 6th place at the moment, only 3 points off 3rd, so all is not lost. But on the weeks where they slow up, on the weeks that they choke, when they dropped a couple of points at Borussia Mönchengladbach last week and never really looked like turning that into a win, there's a sense of panic. And for a club that's so organised at that, we've talked about all these other clubs where there's tension at all times. It's not the case at Bayer Leverkusen. So for them to have this level of expectation is something quite different and new. So to see them free themselves up and play with some sort of fluency yesterday, it feels like it's been a few weeks coming.
Yeah, let me tell you, the final whistle has gone in the Diego Armando, etc. And that game has ended 2-2. Roma were ahead twice there, and Napoli have fought back. And it's ended Napoli 2, Roma 2. A result that keeps Napoli at least with some interest in the very top of the table in Italy, and prevents Roma from really pressing their case for a Champions League place. My star of the week in Germany, Andy, is Nathaniel Brown of Eintracht Frankfurt. He scored in a 3-0 win against Borussia Mönchengladbach. It was Albert Riera's debut as coach. Nathaniel Brown, who is a defender, also scored last week, so he's in good form. And it was their first league win, Eintracht, since mid-December. They've gone 9 without a win in any competition. So I say Nathaniel Brown, who's a much coveted defender, getting goals now to increase his importance to Eintracht. Who's your star of the week?
I've gone for Julian Rierson of Borussia Dortmund, one of the unsungs of Borussia Dortmund, or he was at least until a couple of months ago. Barcelona showed some tentative interest in him.
Is he more sung now, Andy?
Well, yeah, he's sung a little bit, or he's at least hummed, I think it's fair to say. He got all assists for all 4 goals in that Dortmund win on Friday night. Takes him to 11 assists for the season, can play right back, left back, wing back. I'd want him. There's no doubt about it. And he added that sort of edge to Dortmund from set pieces, which made them kind of junior Arsenal for the weekend.
Now, listen, those of you who watched the FA Cup without VAR in England, it should be there, it shouldn't be there, all the rest of it. And, there's been some mad VAR stuff and refereeing over the weekend, none more so than what happened in Milan in the last 24 hours. That'll be our next big story. Honestly, a quite extraordinary game, the Classico d'Italia, quite extraordinary. We'll look after that next.
Arsenal all his life, and I just want to say that I fear for Arsenal again because I genuinely believe that Mikel Arteta's sets out his team not to lose.
Great.
Not to lose. Whereas Man City set out to win. And I don't know how you win something by setting out not to lose. And this is a problem we have every year. We get towards the end, and he thinks that by not losing, getting a draw, we'll be all right. But every time you draw now and the other team wins, you drop 2 points in the Premier League. Yep. And so he's got a tried and tested method of failing. And if my reasons for believing that are, first of all, I've never believed he's going to get us over the line after his first full season. If you look back, I believe there was a moment. There was 8 games left to play. Arsenal were in 4th place. We were 5 points clear of the team in...
So Italy next here on Trans Europe Express. We listen to me, Danny Kelly, and himself, Andy Brassell. Now, earlier in the season, you'll remember that the Italian Classico ended in a 4-3 victory for Juventus over Inter Milan. What I'm about to tell you is that the game this weekend was even more dramatic, but not necessarily for all the best footballing reasons, because, Andy, and I try not to use this phrase too often, it was a blinking madhouse, wasn't it?
It really was, Danny. And I guess what was the frustrating thing is that from a neutral perspective, we got kind of what we wanted from Inter for a while. We've been saying for a while on the show that this is the best team in Italy who should win the league season after season after season. Why they've made it difficult for themselves, I suppose, is they've fallen short in so many of the big matches, as in that one earlier in the season where they played really well and Juventus won it right at the end in stoppage time in extraordinary fashion. Of course, they've already lost to Napoli away this season. They've lost at home to Milan. And given that they're currently 8 points clear at the top, like, this is unusual, isn't it? But they got it over the line against Juventus. But it kind of felt that they didn't really deserve to. Not just because the fact that Juventus were excellent when they were down to 10 men for all the second half, but they shouldn't really have been down to 10 men in the first place.
In fact, the opposite is true. It's Inter who should have been. Explain the circumstances, Andy.
Yeah, so just towards the end of the first half, Alessandro Bastoni is bringing the ball upfield, the Inter centre-back. He goes down under what's not even really a challenge from Pierre Kalulu, who is given a second booking. Now, it's speculated by some commentators that because this is such a clear dive by Bastoni, maybe Kalulu is sent up for ever so briefly, putting his arm in the air to ask for a card. It doesn't seem like that to me. And in fact, the apology from Signor Rocchi, who of course is the chief of the Italian referees, afterwards to an absolutely frothing Juventus board, tells us that referee Damana fell for the foul, and he ended up giving Kalulu this second yellow card for what he perceived as a foul. It wasn't. It was a very, very obvious dive. And of course, the worst bit about it from the Juventus perspective is not just that the yellow card can't be reviewed, so VAR couldn't do anything about it, and nothing can be done about it now in terms of retrospective bans or anything, or appeals. But if Bastoni had been caught for the dive and been pulled for the dive, it would have been a second booking for him. So Inter would have been down to 10, not Juventus.
Now, of course, we saw those of us who are interested in this sort of thing, saw the scenes in the tunnel and then the steps down to the tunnel at the end of the first half where the players were confronting anybody they could find to confront. It was a proper football melee, i.e. no actual violence, just a lot of "do you want some?" and all of that, wasn't it? Well, that's what it was.
Yeah.
But I mean, however badly done by Juventus were feeling, at least they got to very, 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 very late in the game, level at 2-2, and thought, here we go, we've been badly done by here, but it's going to be okay. And then
Piotr Zielinski scores in the 90th minute to win it for Inter. And, you know, this game that is felt so strongly. I mean, of all people who could, you know, underline the bitterness scale for it. Of course, Jose Mourinho, you might remember when Manchester United won at Juventus in the Champions League a few years back. He invited himself onto the pitch just to have a little bit of a pop at the Juventus fans. And really, I guess this shows the strength of his feeling, not just for causing trouble, but for Inter as well, because, you know, this is a huge, huge deal. It's called the Derby d'Italia for a reason. And so it doesn't take much to nurture feelings of upset and being wronged and all that sort of stuff. Juventus played really well. They're so improved under Spalletti. The late equaliser in the last 10 minutes from Manuel Locatelli that should have got them a point didn't, because of this brilliant strike from Zielinski.
Just a quick one here, Andy, about something completely different. On the TV in front of me now, because the football's over, I'm watching the Winter Olympics, which I've watched pretty assiduously. Watch any sport, me, won't I? But ice hockey, there's a big game going on. The United States are 3-up against Germany. Both sides are wearing wonderful ice hockey kits. There's plenty of fighting and bashing people into the boards and all the rest of it. But I find it so hard to follow the game because I can't see the puck. Is it my old eyes? Once it's hit at a certain speed, you can't follow the blinking thing. Am I wrong about this? You can't see it at all.
Well, presumably it must be orange, like, you know, winter footballs, right?
No, it's pitch black. It's pitch black.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really?
And
maybe that's the next change.
When they say that was a great save by the goalkeeper, I go, was it? Because I didn't see him touch anything, you know. Bless it. Bless it. The German kit, by the way, black, orange and red, is fantastic. Just really, really good. Let's return then to the football in Italy. And AC Milan, you know, what would they do without their veteran players? I know Italian clubs that love an oldie, but the sight of Luka Modric scoring a winning game in Serie A, coming up 40, is he? Amazing.
Yeah, so we thought the story of the night was going to be Ruben Loftus-Cheek's second striker does it again on a cold Friday night in Pisa after he opened the scoring. But after Pisa had equalised, it was a winner right at the end by Luka Modric. And when I tell you that 40-year-old Luka Modric scored the winner, you're thinking, okay, well, they were just going for a Hail Mary and he had a shot from miles out, which was one of those great Luka Modric shot from miles out that we occasionally get.
Very occasionally.
It wasn't. It was a 1-2 with Samuel Ricci. And then he goes into the area and slots it in. That's just proving that not only is he 40, but he can do more running than everyone else. And that is so Luka Modric, isn't it?
For a moment, I thought you were going to tell me it was a far post header. But, you know... the great
that would have been something, but they're in second place and they can close that gap on Inter to 6 if they win that game in hand against Como. Of course, talking about the Winter Olympics, as you were, that was the game that was meant to be on last weekend, but wasn't, and originally it was going to be moved to Western Australia, of course, because of the Winter Olympics, whereas instead they've just postponed it, which is what they should have done in the first place.
In the very first place.
Arguing about where which continent the referees were going to come from and all the rest of it. So I'm just going to talk you through, as we so often do, because it's the most thrilling, closest title race normally. And certainly for European places, the race is very tight in Europe. So we've got Inter after 25 games, top with 61. Milan, a second with 53, but they've only played 24. Napoli, 50 in third. We've got Roma in fourth, 47. Juventus, 46 in fifth. And Atalanta starting to catch up. Good little run for them under Rafael Palladino. They've got 42.
Yeah, so the draw between Roma and Napoli tonight that we've just been discussing, it didn't do them much good.
Great game.
But it didn't do them much harm either, really.
No.
My star of the week in Italy, I think, is one for, if you don't understand this, then you've got a heart made of purest flint. It's Eduardo Bove, who came on for the last few minutes for Watford in a 2-2 draw at Preston. No big deal, you might say. Italian player comes on for Watford. He was at Fiorentina, though, on loan from Roma, when he had a heart attack on the pitch over a year and a half ago. Of course, he's had a pacemaker fitted, and a bit like Christian Eriksen, it means he can't play in Italy. The rules are different in England, and he is signed for Watford. And the lad came on, got a few minutes for Watford. Quite what he makes of Deepdale after a career spent in Serie A, I don't know, and the lovely sight of the River Ribble and all the rest of it. But well done, Eduardo. Back from a terrible health scare, playing his first game for 440 days. Who's my star of the week? Who's yours?
Yeah, well done, Edo. You know what? He will have absolutely loved Preston because as a Roman boy who was used to stepping out at the Olympico, I'm sure the history of Preston will have really, really appealed to him as he arrives in English football. But I instead have gone for someone who's still playing in Italy, Nicola Fagioli. Talking of comebacks for very different reasons, of course, he was one of those who served a betting ban. He was like the agent number one, actually, in the Sandro Tonali scandal, which saw him banned. Fagioli had a betting addiction and he was banned for a number of months, having been such a promising young player at Juventus. Now at Fiorentina, opened the scoring with such a classy goal yesterday away at Como. Yes, that's right. Fiorentina won at Como. Big shock, which moves them out of the bottom three.
It's the Fabio Paratici effect working already.
It must be. It must be.
Andy, very quickly, Italy, we're loving another high quality game tonight. A real race for the title. I don't suppose, because you don't live there, you've got any way of answering this, but it strikes me, and I've got a couple of minutes I wanted to talk about this. Overhanging all this, and I get that, I was going to say most of the players in Italy are not Italian, but of course that's not the way it works in Italy. The majority of the players in Serie A are still Italian. The fact that they haven't qualified for the World Cup, just they didn't qualify for the last two, I wonder if it's just hanging over the whole of Italian football as we head towards their World Cup qualifiers in March.
It is, totally. I remember the last time I was in Italy in December, I went to a couple of games into Atalanta. People were talking about it the whole time. And you're like, yeah, I don't think people talk about international football as much when it's not happening in England. But there's a very, very pessimistic view of what's going to happen. People are really, really concerned and nervous about it. It is a potentially huge thing if Italy don't make the World Cup. And, with no harm to any of the teams that they're going to face, including Northern Ireland, I think it would be a poorer World Cup if Italy weren't there.
But I mean, I absolutely hear you. But do you think them not qualifying for a World Cup for the third successive time, does that affect the prestige of Serie A, which to me is a great league? Obviously, some of the great clubs in world football are there. Many of the great players in the world have played and continue to play there. Perhaps it's not what it was 25, 30 years ago.
It's not. And do you know what? That is intrinsically connected to the Italian national team and vice versa. Because I think if you think back really to where Italian football is at the moment, you have to go back to 2006. And that's the year of A, Calciopoli, and B, the World Cup win. And the World Cup win in Germany happened despite Calciopoli. So it happened despite everyone knowing that Italian football was basically going to implode. But since then, it's definitely affected the prestige of Serie A. It's led to a talent drain. It's led to, lower sponsorships, facilities that really need updating and haven't been. Of course, that's partly due to very complicated Italian planning law as well. So, Serie A is not what it was for a number of reasons.
And yet the Italian national team still managed to beat England in the Euro final.
Yes.
That, I'm afraid, is the way it goes for England. Maybe they'll win in the United States and Mexico and Canada in a few months' time. Imagine that. Imagine the fun we'd have here on talkSPORT if that was to happen. Well, a first hour that was absolutely packed. More of that kind of stuff to come in the next 60 minutes, including, among other things, an amazing defeat for Atletico Madrid in Spain and our preview of the 8 crucial Champions League round of 16 qualifiers that are coming up on Tuesday and Wednesday. You'll listen to Trans Europe Express, and as I always say on these Sundays, there are a million things you could be doing, like watching the ice hockey or whatever is going on in the Winter Olympics. But you choose to be with us, and we are really, really grateful.
irony is, I think Arteta is one of the best managers to grace the Premier League for a long time. I think if anyone can, and I just think we just need to play.
Sorry, say that again. What did you say? Just say that Arteta's one of the greatest managers to ever come into the Premier League.
Yeah, can you not hear this evening?
But what are you on about? He ain't won that. He ain't won nothing.
No, but he's a young manager. Wenger came second 3 years on the trot, and then he won the league. You got to give these guys time. And I think
but you just said you've been found out.
Yeah.
So sorry. Do you say that Arteta's one of the greatest managers to grace the Premier League, or recent? I missed what you said. What did you say?
I said Arteta is one of the best managers.
Yeah.
He's come into a club.
Yeah.
I don't know which one of you are talking, but one of you's a Tottenham fan.
No, go on, but I want to know what you said.
He's come into the club. He's changed the culture of the club from something which was.
Yeah, listen. Just say what you said.
Well, I can't remember what I said now.
I can't remember what you said. You said it. Did you say he's one of the greatest?
More green jackets have been lost at the 12th than at the Augusta City dry cleaners. Rory McIlroy knows this better than most. But what is Amen Corner and why is it so iconic? The famous sequence has always been there since the Masters began in 1934. It didn't get its name until '58, though, when American sports writer Herbert Warren Wind, on the left, wrote, "At the farthest reach of the Augusta National Course, down in the Amen Corner." He drew inspiration from the 1933 jazz song Shouting in That Amen Corner by the Dorsey Brothers. The reason behind its difficulty is all in the sand and the water. Tournament officials don't even bother to count the balls lost in there each year, such is the sheer number. The 11th, named White Dogwood, is a downhill 520-yard par 4 with a pond to the left of the green and a bunker to the right. Both cause a lot of trouble each year. The 12th, Golden Bell, is perhaps the most famous hole in the world, with danger everywhere. Many aim for the flag, but look, get it even slightly wrong, and you're in the azaleas at the back, or the bunkers at the front, or even worse, Rays Creek. Or you can play it safe and aim for the open green on the left. You chicken. Tiger Woods once said, if you make 4 bogeys from Thursday to Sunday, you're doing well. And the highest ever score on that hole? 13. It's a par 3. Tom Weiskopf in 1980 was the sorry soul. Often, the iconic Ben Hogan Bridge is the only thing players enjoy about Golden Bell. Even if you escape there unscathed, though, you met with Azalea, the dogleg par 5 13th. It tempts players to go for the green in 2, but cut over those trees on the left at your peril. Every year, it seems, Amen Corner destroys someone's dreams. Rory McIlroy dropped 3 shots through here as his round unravelled in 2011. In 2016, a year after navigating Amen Corner expertly, Jordan Spieth shot a quadruple bogey on the 12th to throw away his green jacket. I mean, it sounds like my game, to be honest. So who'll be the next to be brought to their knees, praying for mercy after Amen Corner?
Yeah, welcome back everybody to the second hour of Trans Europe Express tonight here on talkSPORT. I'm Danny Kelly. With me is Andy Brassell. God knows what he was doing for those few weeks he was off. Probably something very remunerative. But we're so glad that he's back in his proper seat. Brilliantly, though, Daniele and Kevin did. And, of course, they remain great friends of the show. In the course of the next 60 minutes, we'll be looking at what happened in Spain. Forward to, count them, 8 delicious Champions League round of 16 qualifiers. Only one English team are involved with those. All the rest are already through, no doubt, to UEFA's fury. And we'll also be looking at other events going on in Madrid. Welcome one, welcome all to Trans-Europe Express. I know I shouldn't keep going on about it, but 3 gold medals for Great Britain for the first time ever in the Winter Olympics. Pretty amazing. And a first gold medal for Brazil, for anyone who was watching that last night. Absolutely amazing. But, of course, we must concentrate on the football. Why? Because we love it. And why? Because it's the most important sport. Time now for this.
Carrière, le Paris Saint-Germain, Mbappe! Mbappe!
Little give and go, Mbappe's in! Oh, it's 2-2! He scored twice in 2 minutes!
Tête de Kylian Mbappe. Allez, Kylian!
Yeah, the section that's called Mbappe Watch, but which is actually just for us to keep an eye on Real Madrid because they always throw up so many stories. Andy, in a week where there is a Champions League round of 16 qualifiers, absolutely critical for the 16 teams involved, including Real Madrid, whose first leg is against Benfica in Portugal. Should I be at all concerned that Kylian Mbappe did not take part in this weekend's 4-1 win against Real Sociedad?
I think you're probably less concerned if you're a Real Madrid fan and more concerned if you're a France fan, because Alvaro Arbeloa had seemed to indicate that he would play against Real Sociedad. He didn't. He talked about it afterwards and said it's due to a pain that he's got in his knee, which never sounds great. But he definitely will play against Benfica this week. So what has become clear is that he will be flogged by Real Madrid in the matches that matter, really regardless of what sort of physical state he's in. That's the way that it's been perceived in France, at least. And obviously they want to know that he's going to be his very best for the World Cup. But as well, I think in terms of Real Madrid's medium term, it matters as well, because he's clearly being managed a little bit at the moment, and it can't have been an easy decision while they're still in the La Liga title race to leave him out of the game at the weekend. But they're so dependent on him. Like, so dependent on him. Now, funnily enough, the last 2 times they've played without him, they've played with Gonzalo Garcia up front.
Yep.
And he's played brilliantly well. And he scored 5 minutes into this game against Real Sociedad. Now, it's funnily enough that the 2 times that Gonzalo has started instead of Mbappe have been against Betis, who hadn't lost a single away game and got beaten 5-1. And now Real Sociedad, who hadn't lost under their new coach Pellegrino Matarazzo and lost 4-1. To Real Madrid. The 2 best performances of Real Madrid that we've had in the last little while have been ones where Kylian Mbappe hasn't involved. And this is the guy who scored 43% of their goals this season.
Yeah, I must say, watching this afternoon, watching France's incredible rugby union team absolutely disembowel Wales until they let up towards the end. And thinking about the squad that France are going to take to the World Cup, I'm very glad they don't play cricket in France, or don't take it very seriously. That's all I'm saying. There'll be nothing left for England and others to win if the French take up cricket. Arbeloa's comments, Andy, about the injury, which of course, and whenever you mention the word knee in football terms, that's the one that sets the red lights blinking.
Knee is to football what calf is to basketball, basically.
Would you describe his answer as evasive?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really sort of given the impression, though, it's a sort of confirmation bias with Alvaro Arbeloa, because people don't believe that he's going to be the Real Madrid manager in the long term, that it just gives the impression of, you haven't got the authority to speak about this, have you? That's the impression that you get from that, really, I suppose, fairly or unfairly. Because the remarkable thing is, off the back of that, this very, very good result, and there were 2 penalties by Vinicius Junior in there as well. And we'll come on to the contribution in a minute of Trent Alexander-Arnold.
Absolutely,
he was maybe the surprise pick in the 11, and he was excellent. It's the fact that this win has put Real Madrid on top of the La Liga, at least until Barcelona play tomorrow night away at Girona, which won't be super easy.
Yeah, let's talk about 2 things and link them together for me, Andy. No major club in Europe is going to have a bigger defensive reshuffle than Real Madrid in the coming summer. It's almost like what Bournemouth did this summer, if they accept the comparison. So Trent Alexander-Arnold starting to get picked more often and making a bigger contribution, despite the injuries that suffer, his timing couldn't be better, because their right back, left back, centre back, main ones are all out of contract at the end of this season.
Yeah, that's right. So I guess we have 3 categories of out of contract Madridista at the moment. So we have Dani Carvajal, the rival for Trent at right back.
Currently club captain as well, yeah.
Yeah, and club legend with a sackload of trophies over his shoulder, who took it very badly last week when Trent Alexander-Arnold was brought on for the last 20 minutes at Valencia and not him. So he had to be talked down by the coaching staff on the pitch afterwards. And he had a meeting with Alvaro Arbeloa to clear the air on Monday. So it was a big thing. We don't know if he's going to get a new contract yet. We know that David Alaba is not going to get a new contract. And we're again not quite sure what's going to happen with Antonio Rudiger. I mean, of course, the most delicious rumour is that he might end up at Atletico Madrid. And I think the world has been waiting for Diego Simeone and Antonio Rudiger, hasn't it? And
but the signing of his contract by Upamecano surely means it's more likely that Real Madrid will have to make Rudiger a ludicrous offer to make sure they don't lose him.
It's felt that he's maybe past his best in some areas. In some areas of the
well,
Real
then
Madrid.
they'll end up with Eric Dyer. You know,
That's up. yeah. It's always a possibility. Well, I certainly think this implies that they're gonna make a big shift for Ibrahima Konate, surely from here. But they need at least 2 centre backs. Of course, the other part of it is the one downside of this very good win over Real Sociedad. The penalty from which Miko Oyarzabal equalised in the first half, given away by a really bad challenge by Dean Huijsen. The one guy who we know probably will be there next season because they spent a lot of money bringing him in and he's on a long contract, doesn't look comfortable at the moment. He's taken a while to settle.
Yes, and young players. I mean, we forget, of course, because he made that huge move to Real Madrid. He is still a very young player. But if
it's an enormous leap. It's an enormous leap from Bournemouth to Real Madrid. There's no getting over that. Despite the financial strength of the Premier League, it's an enormous step up in terms of pressure as much as anything else. And I guess that step up in pressure from any club to Real Madrid is something that Trent Alexander-Arnold has felt with the shadow of Carvajal over him, with the sense that he might have been Xabi Alonso's pick, although obviously they've been speaking to him for way before Xabi Alonso got the job. But the fact that, that was hurried through so he could play at the Club World Cup. So it's funny because Trent Alexander-Arnold was in unbelievable form. If we go back to the start of December, he had that really great game away at Athletic Bilbao when they won 3-0. And then he got injured halfway through that game and out for a long time for the second time this season. So he came back last week, started this game, created the goal for Gonzalo 5 minutes in with a fantastic early pass, which of course Liverpool fans will see in their sleep, close their eyes, and they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. He was involved in the third goal for Federico Valverde. And for the first time, he's getting really rave reviews in the Madrid press. People are underlining the fact that a fully fit Trent Alexander-Arnold adds another dimension to the way that Real Madrid play, especially with Antonio Carreras on the other side. And, it could be a new way of Real Madrid being exciting and attacking when really for the last decade, they haven't been a particularly exciting or attacking side. It's worth underlining, actually, with all of this defensive uncertainty at the moment, Danny, best defensive record in La Liga.
Yeah. Let me ask you another question, Andy, and I know that this will make clips for social media. So far, Thomas Tuchel hasn't put a foot wrong as England manager, as far as I can see. The team's played well. They've qualified at a canter. He speaks beautifully. He signed his new contract extension, all the rest of it. And yet there's a part of me that goes, really? With all due respect to two excellent footballers in Reece James and Tino Livramento, are really going to go to the World Cup without Trent Alexander-Arnold? Assuming he's fit?
Yeah, I mean, the assuming he's fit bit is the main thing here. I think we've got more of a discussion if Trent Alexander-Arnold had played every game for Real Madrid this season. I want him to go. He's one of England's best footballers, and England will be better for him being there. But first, he has to get through some games on a consistent basis for Real Madrid. He has to prove he can do that. Because the one thing that links Reece James, Tino Livramento and Trent Alexander-Arnold, poor recent fitness record.
Yeah.
I mean, at the moment, you would have to say, with the way their fitness records are, it would be a big risk for Tuchel to go into the World Cup with two of those, let alone all three.
Yeah.
Three seems very unlikely, of course, but
no, it won't take three.
Any two of that, any two of those, it seems like a bit sort of life in your hands, despite the fact that all of those players can play a couple of different positions to a very good standard.
Yeah, the thing that strikes me as well, every time we talk to Tim Vickery, he tells us how hot it's going to be particularly in Mexico, obviously, and in continental United States for the World Cup. So just a thought, Andy, somebody with the range of passing of Trent Alexander-Arnold, somebody who can play a long pass, perhaps in a game where people are slowing down and all the rest of it, I think it could be a very, very potent weapon. But of course, I'm not the England manager and very unlikely to be anytime soon. Right, let's take another quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk to you about the football in Spain. And a week where Atletico Madrid, God bless them, have been all over the place with VAR, with big victories, and today a stunning defeat. That's next here on Trans Europe Express.
Speaking on the Overlap Stick to Football podcast, and Postecoglou criticised Tottenham's transfer strategy while claiming his former side are not a big club in the wake of Thomas Frank's sacking.
You know, when you walk into Tottenham, what you see everywhere is to dare is to do. It's everywhere. And yet their actions are almost the antithesis of that. Right. It's a real curious in terms of understanding what are they trying to build? You know, what are they? Is it... There's obviously, they've built an unbelievable stadium, unbelievable training facilities. But when you look at the expenditure, particularly, you know, in their wages structure, they're not a big club. I saw that because when we were trying to sign players, we weren't in the market for those players. It's just who we are, mate.
Oh my God. To dare is to do. What do you lot do? You do nothing. What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, look.
What do you do? What do you do? Do you dare?
Well, we're not doing, are we?
Do you dare? And then once you've dared, do you do doing?
Well, we're not doing it at the moment, are we?
Yeah, Spain now, people. And I want to talk to you, Andy, first of all, in the midweek, it was the semi-final first legs in the Copa del Rey, which saw a Basque derby and a huge game between Atletico Madrid and Barcelona, which we'll come on to. The Basque derby was won by Real Sociedad. I don't suppose we should be surprised by that, because Athletic Bilbao just can't seem to get any traction with this season. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And continuing worries over Nico Williams, who didn't play in their game away at Oviedo today, still kept back with a fitness problems that had dogged him all season after he signed that extended contract. And yeah, goal down going into the second leg away at Anoeta now, having lost and deserved to lose, actually. Real Sociedad, I thought, were really good again. The impact of Pellegrino Matarazzo has been incredible. And I thought it might be harder for Real Madrid than it eventually was yesterday. Real Sociedad had their moments, by the way, ended up having more shots than Real Madrid in that game, despite the fact that Real Madrid played well and won well. But really, it's all, as you say, about the second semi-final on Thursday, where it was a memorable Metropolitano night, and they've had a few of them since they've moved in. But just put this into context: Atletico Madrid 4, Barcelona 0, 4-0 at half-time. It was really something.
But Andy, you could argue that a 4-0 defeat for Barcelona was not the most remarkable thing about the game, because we've seen VAR discussions go to 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes. Rarely 7 minutes, and I don't have to keep going. Tell us how long the VAR went in one decision in this game in the first half.
In the second half, it looked like Pau Kubasi had pulled one back at 4-1, which may seem insignificant, but it's not, because it's a two-legged semi-final, as you pointed out before, and Atletico still have to go to Camp Nou. So even if they'd have got one back, it would have made a massive difference. And of course, when there was still half an hour, 35 minutes left, that could have made a massive difference to how the rest of the game went. So Pau Kubasi put it in the back of the net. It was disallowed 8 minutes later. 8 minutes later.
How can we continue to tolerate this in a professional sport, the top level of a professional sport?
It's awful. It's awful. And on this occasion, like, obviously Barcelona were really put out by it. It seemed to me like the right decision was eventually come to, but Barcelona didn't agree with that. They thought there was a serious error in it. Frankie de Jong came out and talked about it afterwards, although I don't think we should be taking players' words for it necessarily, especially when they're in the game. But there was an issue whether Robert Lewandowski, who was very, very, very slightly offside, had touched it before it come to Kubasi. That was the question. Anyway, what happened is the semi-automatic offside had broken, so the VAR official had to literally draw the line. So that was the issue.
Yeah. It strikes me, I don't care anymore whether they get the decisions exactly right. It's
no,
the
but that is
the game.
You see, that is the problem, Danny, that not everyone in every country feels like that. So whereas we feel like that quite strongly as an English football supporting community, and we've always felt since VAR come in, and that's why VAR has always been such a bad fit for English football, because we have a sense of what is right, what fits the flow of the game, what fits the spirit of the game. In other countries, particularly Italy, Portugal, Turkey, for example, it's about just absolutely showing you're working, and they really don't care how long it takes. Whereas in Germany, they're a little bit closer to us. There's that feeling of this isn't a great experience for the fan in stadium, and I always feel that is paramount as well, and shouldn't be forgotten. But what I thought was really interesting is Hansi Flick, who could have easily put the boot in his pre-match press conference ahead of Barcelona's game against Girona, which, as we said earlier, is tomorrow night, Monday night.
Yeah.
He said, well, I knocked on the referee's door and I was pleasantly surprised that he let me in. We had a really great dialogue, and it was constructive. I can't remember the last time I heard a coach say that. And clearly, dialogue is such a huge part of it, isn't it?
It is, but I'm going to make a compromise now, and I didn't think I was in the mood for compromising about this. Italy and Turkey can keep it, and England should get rid of it. Simple as that. There's my compromise.
I like it.
Yeah. So Atletico, then they're playing this weekend against Rayo Vallecano in the bottom three, in the relegation spots. But I mean, they just thrashed Barcelona, so they can afford to rest a few players, and it'll all be okay, except it wasn't.
Yeah, I'm not sure they can afford to rest that many, Danny. I mean, everyone who came into that Atletico Madrid side today, I don't think Diego Simeone will be picking them again in the near future. He'd made 5 substitutions by the 60th minute, and he'd made so many changes in the first place. He still wasn't able to bring on the 2 that might have made a real difference, Antoine Griezmann and his own son, Giuliano. So to say that Atletico lost 3-0 to Rayo and got off lightly seems an extraordinary thing to say, doesn't it, in this sort of mini Madrid derby. Now, in one sense, it didn't really matter because Atletico are out of the title race anyway, but with Betis win tonight, 2-1 at Mallorca, despite our mate Vedat Muriqi scoring for Mallorca in the second half. It means that they're only 4 points behind them now, Betis, so it is getting a little bit tighter in terms of the Champions League race. But as well, when there's been so much discussion before that Copa semi-final first leg this week about more discussion about what does the future look like past Simeone, which, you know, we don't necessarily know that's imminent, but when people are talking like that, you know that Atleti have hit a wall, and they're pretty much in the same position that they were last season, in that they'll get the Champions League, but, well, they might win the Copa del Rey at this rate, but, you know, are they winning the Champions League? Are they challenging to win La Liga? No, I think is the obvious answer.
And if you consider the amount of money they spent in the last 3 transfer windows as well. But Andy,
it's an extraordinary amount, Danny.
It is.
You look at their resources compared to Rayo, this should not happen. And every bit as they were brilliant during the week, and Ademola Lookman, by the way, has had an incredible start to his Atletico Madrid career. But, you know, when he came on as substitute this afternoon, it was already beyond salvaging against a team that are not only much smaller, and a club that are not only much smaller than Atletico Madrid, but are in profound institutional crisis at the moment.
Reflected in the fact they weren't even playing on their own pitch during this 3-0 victory.
No, they weren't. And they were playing at Leganés because their pitch is not considered fit enough for La Liga football at the moment. Now, they did some work on it this week, so they had hoped that they would be able to play the game at home. In the meantime, they've been training at Getafe on the outskirts of Madrid, and then they play this game at Leganés on the outskirts of Madrid. The police had refused to let them sell tickets while they didn't have it all sorted out where they were going to play. And while the game was going on, hundreds and hundreds of the Rayo Ultras were outside their stadium, their empty stadium of Vallecas, which should have been hosting the game this afternoon, protesting against Raúl Martín Presa, the president, who's been contested for a very, very long time now, but it's reached a fever pitch. Like the players have started protesting against the poor quality of the facilities and the training and the changing rooms and even the showers. There'd been no hot water at some points this season, and the pitch is in such a state that they had to call off their last home game against Oviedo. Obviously, Oviedo, in a quite opportunistic way, petitioned La Liga that they should be given the points. So they got a little. They got a little bit ahead of it, Rayo. And when I say they got a little bit ahead of it, they announced officially on Friday night at 10 p.m. local time that they would be playing this game at Butarque, the home of Leganés. But for their players to go out and put together a performance like this, in which Andre Ratiu, the right back, is such a brilliant player, by the way, and someone will pick him up this summer, the Romanian right back. He's so good. He created the first goal scored by Fran Lopez. For them to, under all this institutional pressure, when their livelihoods are being threatened, when the future of the club is being threatened, to pull out a performance like this is, never mind how bad Atletico were. What Rayo did this afternoon was nothing short of magnificent.
Yeah, performance of the season in Spain. Who's your star of the week in Spain, Andy?
My star of the week is going to be Lagi Ramazani, of course, on loan at the moment from Leeds United to Valencia. It was the Valencia derby. They were away at Levante. He opened the scoring with an absolute stunner of a left-foot volley, and yeah, he did get the somersault afterwards.
Okay, well, mine is Martin Satriano of Getafe. He is an Argentinian striker who was at Lyon, but he has had a serious ACL injury. And then, of course, Lyon brought in Endrick, so he's been loaned out or sold, I'm not sure which, to Getafe. Well, he scored as they beat Villarreal. It's a huge win for Getafe. So Martin Satriano is my star of the week in Spain. Now, listen, the latest episode of How to Win the World Cup is now live. Matt Ford and Tim Vine are joined by former USA goalkeeper Brad Friedel as they discuss how the host nations are preparing ahead of the World Cup this summer. That's How to Win the World Cup, the podcast, available now on the talkSPORT app or your favourite podcast platform. Have a listen to that. It's really, really good.
Alex Crook has been crowing about this for the last 24 hours because, of course, this has been his motto. He said, I felt like Tottenham was saying, we're one of the big boys, and the reality is, I don't think they are.
Well, it's interesting. If I've been saying that in an Australian accent and holding up the Europa League trophy for the past 6 months, maybe Tottenham fans might believe me a bit more because he's their hero, isn't he? Despite the fact he finished 17th last season. And he's right. He said all the things that I've been saying. They're a big club in terms of the training ground is fantastic. The stadium is the best in the Premier League, if not the best in Europe. But they're not a big club in terms of trophies won, in terms of global fan base, when you compare them to the likes of Liverpool and Manchester United and Arsenal, especially now that Son is not there anymore, because that did open up all kinds of avenues for them. And they're not a big club in terms of the transfer fees they pay, because Dominic Solanke is still their record signing at £65 million. And they're not a big club in terms of the wages.
Well, actually, that does make them a big club in world football because there's not many clubs that play that sort of money for players. Most of them are in the Premier League.
Club, though.
But wages are...
Well, we all sat and watched that amazing last night of the Champions League ordinary fixtures in the league as teams were going in and out of the top 8, in and out of the bottom 8. A format that I'm yet to be convinced by, but that last day is something to see. The result, of course, is that 16 teams, including some of the biggest clubs in the world and many previous winners of the Champions League, now have to play off in a two-legged way to get through to the round of 16. Tuesday night sees 4 ties: Galatasaray against Juventus, Dortmund and Atalanta, Benfica against Real Madrid, and Monaco against PSG. Let's start, Andy, with Galatasaray against Juventus. Juventus much improved since they got rid of Igor Tudor, but sooner or later, one of these big Turkish sides, particularly Galatasaray, is going to make significant progress into the latter stage of the Champions League.
Maybe they will. I'm not convinced it'll be here, Danny, particularly with Juventus, as you say, not just doing themselves an enormous amount of credit in the Derby d'Italia yesterday, but generally looking like they have a direction under Luciano Spalletti. I think over two legs, it's hard to see Galatasaray beating them. Having said that, Juventus and Galatasaray do have history, of course. Who can forget one of Antonio Conte's many Champions League mishaps in Istanbul? Do you remember when the game, it was a match day 6 game, was snowed off? The game was stopped because of heavy snow in Istanbul. So it was played the next day. The rest of the game was played the next day. Galatasaray decided to use a tractor to remove the snow from the pitch, which left it in a particular occasion. And Wesley Sneijder, of all people, sort of levitated above the Hackney marshes of Istanbul to score the winning goal in that and start what has been the never-ending story of Antonio Conte and the Champions League. So whatever you think of Galatasaray and Juventus, that you have to think of that. But Galatasaray got a big win this weekend, 5-1 win this weekend. Hat-trick in that for Mauro Icardi. Interestingly, the first time since he's been fit again, and when I say fit again, I don't just mean recovered from his ACL, but actually looking like his fighting weight. Of course, there's been a lot of discussion over his future, his contract, which is going to run out at the end of the season. Will he stay on for a pay cut, which still looks like the most likely possibility. First time that him and Victor Osimhen have started a game together since Icardi's been properly fit again in this calendar year. So it'd be interesting to see if they do start together against Juventus. That would be brave from Okan Buruk. So let's see what happens there.
Dortmund against Atalanta, teams that on their day are very entertaining and can do really well. And I know Dortmund went to the final not so long ago, but neither of these look to me, Andy, as people will be going much beyond the round of 16.
No, I think that's fair to say, although remember Dortmund quarter-finalists last season and finalists the year before, with arguably more dysfunctional teams than the ones they have now. Well, not arguably, with more dysfunctional lineups than the one they have now. So even though they've had a few little blips in the Champions League of late, which have denied them the top 8, I think you have to make Dortmund the favourites for this. They've had a pretty lousy record traditionally against Serie A teams in the last decade or so. Atalanta being the exception to that. They're their opponent of choice. But as we said earlier, briefly, Atalanta have looked much improved under Palladino recently, of course, beat Chelsea towards the end of the league stage to get themselves in this position. There were points on the final night of the league stage when they were in the top 8, of course. And they've got what is kind of a rare commodity in European football at the moment, in that they've got a striker, a centre-forward, old-fashioned centre-forward, who really looks the part. And you know what? If he hadn't have failed at West Ham already, people would be looking at Gianluca Scamacca and the way he's played over the last couple of months and thinking, yeah, some Premier League club's going to pick him up because he's been great.
The one I'm looking forward to, I guess, most is the one that I saw most recently, the tie between Benfica and Real Madrid. Of course, both legendary clubs, both multi-winners of the tournament in the past. And you'd say Real Madrid are hot favourites for this. Except, of course, Benfica showed that they can do almost anything in qualifying for this match.
Yeah, it's remarkable, really. And interesting that Anatoly Trubin, who scored that memorable goal, the most memorable goal of this Champions League season, or pretty much any Champions League season, right at the end of that, he dropped a bit of a clanger away at Santa Clara yesterday, which led to a goal in a match that Benfica should have won easily, but in the end they only won 2-1 because of that out in the Azores. And I think we've got to bear in mind that Benfica, despite being sort of very much on the periphery of the title race in Portugal, they're still unbeaten in the league season. Given that they changed their coach after Champions League match 1, of course, they were 2-0 up against Qarabag, went down 3-2 and sacked Bruno Lage immediately afterwards, which brought Mourinho back to Portugal. I think Mourinho's done a pretty respectable job. Of course, there are many ways that you can pick holes in his current work rather than his historic work. But in the circumstances, he's done pretty well. I think it's fair to say. I guess the difference is in this one, you don't fancy Benfica rolling over Real Madrid twice in a row, even if it is at the Estadio de Luz. And secondly, the manner of that defeat might have seemed academic from the outside to Real Madrid because they're still in the Champions League. It wasn't. It means they weren't in the top 8, the fact that they lost that game, and also the way they played made their players and their coaching staff really quite angry. There was a lot of fallout from that, a few quite frank discussions behind the scenes. So I get the feeling they're going to be very, very prepared for this.
Yeah, and just like last season, PSG have not qualified in the top 8. We all know what happened last year when they went on that amazing run. And to me, the team seemed to be improving week by week by week by week. So by the time it got to the final, it was no surprise that they ran away with it. Disappointing, though, that they drew Monaco here, Andy, because whether you like it or not, it all looks a bit day to day.
Yeah, and bear in mind that we go back like 10 years and this was being called El Clasico because they were the two of the richest clubs in European football. Monaco were out there getting Radamel Falcao and James Rodriguez and Joao Moutinho, and we've come a long way since then in opposing directions. Monaco have had a nightmare of a season. They are going to have to work really hard to get any sort of European football this season. A lot of their signings have gone wrong, not least Pogba, Eric Dyer after a very promising start, which is sad to see. He's been dogged by injury since a good first month or two. And their win against Nantes was the best they've played in a while. They've had 2 big wins recently. The game against Nantes, a 4-0 win over Rennes, but those are the only 2 games they've won in the last 9. Which tells you of a season that's fallen way, way, way below expectation. For them, it's just about keeping it alive for the second leg. And for me, it's about them keeping it alive for the second leg because I'm going to the second leg.
Okay. I'll ask you later on what games you're going to see this week, so I'll be very excited to hear. Let me tell you about talkSPORT's coverage of football in the middle of the week. On Tuesday, here on talkSPORT, it's kick-off with Adrian Durham, with all the goals that go in from the Champions League and from the EFL. Some big games there as well. While over on talkSPORT 2, you can hear that game between Benfica against Real Madrid. Ian Danta and Dean Ashton will bring you that. On Wednesday, over on talkSPORT 2, and it's the earlier kick-off at 5:45 in the evening. Qarabag against Newcastle. Jim Proudfoot and Darren Ambrose will bring you full commentary of that game. Meanwhile, over here on talkSPORT, the 8 o'clock kick-off in the Premier League between the worst team in the league, Wolves, and the best team in the league, Arsenal, will be here on talkSPORT with commentary from Joe Shannon and the former England captain Stuart Pearce. Don't forget, most of these huge games turn up on talkSPORT, your home of live football, where next we'll be looking at Wednesday's games in the Champions League.
Let's go to Alan, who's a Man City fan, right, Al?
Yes, good evening. I've got a little song for you at the end for the Arsenal fans as well. But do you know what, Arsenal? Man City are a snake, and they've had their foot on our necks where we've been weak, and they should have cut our heads off and buried us in the sand and they've not, and now we're going to come back and beat them, and we're going to win this title. And in a couple of weeks after we play them at the Etihad, when we give them a footballing lesson, you can ring me up and I'll come on the show again, because Man City are a better team to watch than what Arsenal are. And he's coming on. The Premier League trophy's coming back to the Etihad. And listening to these Arsenal fans tonight, we are right in there, Ned. All the memories of all the years previous are all coming flooding back. And we're going to win the league. And I'll give you my song now.
Go on in. Is it clean?
Crumbling again, ole, ole. Crumbling again, ole, ole. Crumbling again. Crumbling again. Crumbling again, ole, ole.
So Wednesday in the Champions League, in these qualifiers to get into the last 16, Karabag playing Newcastle, Bodo Glimt take on Inter Milan, Olympiacos play Bayern Leverkusen, and Club Brugge take on Atletico Madrid. Andy, I've got to start with this game between Karabag and Newcastle, just about as far as Newcastle could go for an away tie. And before they paid a visit to Dr. Tottenham, they were in very sickly form on the road. They probably feel a bit better about themselves having won now in North London, but I don't care what anyone says, the distance involved here does not help the away side.
No, it doesn't. And this will be pretty much the last game that they'll have wanted. If you compare that to, say, a Monaco, the difference that makes, because the travel basically wipes out your week, doesn't it, really?
Yeah.
It's very, very tough for them in that sense. Yes, of course, they should win. But I think we've seen already that Newcastle on the road, unreliable, despite those 2 wins this week, which came in very particular circumstances, you have to say, at Spurs and Aston Villa. But Karabag have been decent at home, a couple of good home results, particularly that one against Eintracht Frankfurt, which got them here. The fact that they were 2-1 down with 15 minutes left and they came back to win that. They are the most stable of teams in the Champions League, really, because even though they're not in it year after year after year, they've had the same coach for going on 20 years in Gurban Gurbanov. They know exactly who they are and what they are. There's some really interesting South American talent in there. Camilo Duran scored regularly during the group stage, and Leandro Andrade is great value as well. And then over recent years, they've had increasing talent drip through from French academies and even some older players. So you look at Abdallah Zubair, who is their captain and is a terrific player, who came through at Lille. He's heading into his 30s now, but a player who can both make them move through the gears and then put his foot on the ball if they need to slow the pace of it a little bit as well. And there's that atmosphere in Baku, which when they're playing well, when they're having a spell of momentum, that crowd is noisy and really gets behind them. So there are a number of factors. Look, on paper, Newcastle should win this, no doubt about it. But then you look at some of the results that they've managed, and we talked about that one at Benfica this season. And Karabag were able to turn up and just play like it was a free hit against Liverpool on the last night, because they didn't need to win to get into the final 24. So how far they've come over a series of different European campaigns. And of course, you know, they played well at Tottenham going back about 10 years in the Europa League. They've had so many experiences in European competition that they've built themselves into a genuine European force.
And if Newcastle can complain that they've got the most difficult draw in terms of travel, I imagine the players of Inter Milan going to the Arctic Circle in mid-February will say, hang on, hold our fur-lined coat.
Yeah, and I suppose, like, if you're one of the older players, of course we know Inter have got a little bit younger from last season when they were really creaking towards the end of the season. if you're feeling a little bit like, oh, I've got a lot of games at the moment, thinking, hang about, these lot haven't even started their league season yet. You know, they're having lovely training sessions and probably saunas and ice baths consecutively and all the rest of it.
Eating Lundqvist and all that.
Yes, exactly. And I think as well, what will earn Bodo Glimt the respect of Inter is not just the fact that they're formidable at home. And, you know, some good teams have lost there, including some Serie A teams more than once, Jose Mourinho's Roma. But also, I think you look at those last two results in the group to beat Manchester City and then away at Atletico, both games that those teams could have done with winning at the time. And Bodo Glimt went out there and took them on won both of those games, which are nothing short of jaw-dropping results. So you can say that Bodo Glimt have built up an empire over recent years, and they have. They're still not expected to win those games against the very elite of European football. It's an incredible effort, and they didn't steal either of those games either.
What about Inter, Andy? Because we've seen them starting to round into, which we think they should be, the champions of Italy, though it is still, they still can take nothing for granted there. They got such a walloping in the final last year of the Champions League. I wondered whether they'd regroup successfully, whether they'd recover from the shame of what happened to them against PSG. But again, on paper, you know, you only have to look at their strikers, their centre backs. On paper, they should go deep into the tournament again.
Yeah, they should do, and I think they're well equipped to be so. Look, draw dependent, obviously, but I would expect at least the quarterfinals, if not more. You know, they're incredibly dangerous. They defend well. They've got an excellent goalkeeper, and they do have a better squad this year. So the fact that they've been a little bit more scratchy in getting through, that doesn't really faze me, especially when, as you said, the winner from last year needed to go through the punishment round. And of course, PSG are again playing Ligue 1 opposition at this stage, just as they did last year.
Let's talk about the tie between Olympiacos and Bayer Leverkusen. I should say Angelos Marinakis is Olympiacos. He might have taken their manager, but no, he hasn't quite managed that this time round, has he?
Oh, if they'd have brought in Mendilibar to avoid relegation, that would have been brilliant. They should have done that. They should have done that.
That would have been amazing. Again, a bit like Turkish football, Olympiacos' victory in one of the other tournaments, other than the Champions League, was amazing. And Greek football is it's well funded in many cases, and it's so passionately followed that the thought of a Greek team getting into the last 16 of the Champions League is pretty exciting. It would also be good for the tournament. And I think against a Bayer Leverkusen team still in the throes of change, Andy, I think Olympiacos will say they've got a decent chance here.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, and especially when you go back a couple of games, and one of the damaging defeats for Bayer Leverkusen in this first bit of 2026 was away at Olympiacos, a game in which they weren't very good at all and went down 2-0, which there was a long light of soul searching on the way back from Piraeus for the Leverkusen players and some frank discussions. It's fair to say. It's so difficult to know what to expect from Leverkusen at the moment. Player for player, obviously they have a lot more than Olympiacos, despite their mix of experience and youth. The first leg will be tough. There's no doubt about that, but they know what to expect. They were there like 3 weeks ago, and a little bit like Real Madrid, they will really want to improve on what was a pretty dire display in that game. But like we said, Leverkusen are playing a different sort of sport now. Something is expected of them. They're not the trappings of an elite club, but none of the pressure of an elite club that they used to be. They've done very well on the whole since the Xabi Alonso years of not forgetting what they are, of just sort of saying, okay, we're not Bayern and we're not trying to be. We're not Dortmund and we're not trying to be. But now they're faced with the prospect of not getting into the Champions League, in the Bundesliga. If they're not making the top four, that's a massive failure for them. And as well, they need to get into the last 16 because that was the yardstick set during the Xabi Alonso era, and they will expect to beat Olympiacos.
Meanwhile, you've got Atletico Madrid with their pretty good record. I mean, at times, fantastic record in the Champions League. Those two heartbreaking defeats in the final, still, in relatively recent memory, up against Club Brugge. Now, you would say normally, well, this is a mismatch, but Club Brugge in the last 2 or 3 years, Andy, have been very quietly improving their squad, and more to the point, I think, for this conversation, proving themselves quite a tricky prospect in Europe, and particularly in Belgium.
Yeah, that's right. And you know what? That they had some great performances during the group stages. I mean, maybe the game of the group stage, notwithstanding Benfica and Real Madrid, was Club Brugge against Barcelona. Fantastic game, 3-3 draw, which Club Brugge could have easily won. They were excellent that night, and Carlos Forbes, formerly of Wolves, had a particularly good game in that one as well. Look, they're another team used to achieving in Europe. They are a team that got in the last 16 last season. Of course, they knocked out Atalanta at this stage as well. So not to be messed with. But if there's one team for whom seeding is the most important, I think it's Atletico, because we were talking about them earlier, and they're often quite shoddy on the road, and that's been the case in the Champions League for years and years and years. They've lost some big games on the road, and they've given some really won performances on the road in the Champions League in particular. For them to go first and then go back to the in Belgium and then go back to the Metropolitano with a sense of what they want to do, I think that is really, really important for them. And again, I think it puts into perspective that raft of changes they made today. So having a fresh Simeone, having a fresh Griezmann, all of that is really, really going to count in this game.
Andy, an unfair question now, because we saw last year, for instance, the way that PSG, in horse racing terms, rounded the final bend and then accelerated down the home straight to absolutely romp the Champions League, because you wouldn't have predicted them as runaway winners perhaps in February. But where do you see the contenders for the trophy at the moment? Here's a good question for you. Could Manchester City knit together, I mean, the amount of players they bought in the last 2 or 3 years, could they knit those players together and perhaps, without the pressure, if, say, Arsenal win at Wolves during the week, that game live here on talkSPORT on Wednesday, without perhaps the pressure of having to catch Arsenal in the Premier League, could they be an outsider or more than an outsider of this Champions League?
I mean, I'm finding it quite hard to concentrate at the moment, Danny, because in one of the breaks in NBA All-Star, there's a middle-aged woman on a unicycle flicking rice bowls and catching them on her head. But that notwithstanding, I would say that Bayern and Arsenal, maybe recency bias, are still my favourites, slightly followed by PSG. But if you're talking about Manchester City, I think this is a really interesting one, because my instinct tells me that they're one of the best, if not the best attack in the competition. Such versatility and the best centre forward there is. I'm not quite sure I believe them defensively. I'm not sure that side of it is.
They've got a great
really
goalkeeper, a great shot-stopping goalkeeper.
That is the thing. Donnarumma is the thing. He was the guy who, it's easy to talk about the great football that PSG played last season. They don't win it without Donnarumma. They don't come close to winning it without Donnarumma, who's outstanding against Arsenal at home, who's outstanding at Aston Villa away, despite the fact that they lost that game. And he's being exactly that same goalkeeper for Manchester City that he was for PSG, with, of course, City having evolved slightly.
Yeah, it's fascinating. For me, I agree with that. Some of that requires Rodri to get back. I know he's had that terrible injury, but he needs to get back 5, 10, 15%, whatever it is, back to the very top of his form, because then suddenly you've got the goalkeeper, the central midfielder, the striker. It all starts to make much more sense. But I don't disagree with you. Looking forward to the Champions League final in Budapest, and Harry Kane denying Arsenal the Champions League. That is something we're all, I think, here on talkSPORT looking forward to very, very much indeed.
Labour MP. They say, listen, Keir, your position is untenable. This is all about appointing that rat, Peter Mandelson.
We've now had another resignation from number 10. The plot is thickening, the noose is tightening.
His failings are internal. He's useless, incompetent, has no political judgment.
This is all part of Starmer's reset, getting rid of his inner circle. So Chris Wormold, we think fairly reluctantly, has stepped down.
What an absolutely crazy week for Keir Starmer. His second cabinet secretary, gone. His third chief of staff, gone. His fourth director of communications, gone.
Who would have thought a sporting event's halftime show could have a bigger impact than the game itself? Well, the Super Bowl halftime show does exactly that. In 2024, Usher brought in an audience of 180 million worldwide, the biggest ever in the event's history. But how did singing and dancing get to be the centerpiece of America's biggest sporting event? The first edition of the Super Bowl was held in 1967 when the Green Bay Packers beat the Kansas City Chiefs in Los Angeles. Because of the sheer size of the event, organisers wanted to put on entertainment at halftime for the fans in the stadium. It was a display of marching bands, dancers and pure USA patriotism, and that was the theme that followed for years. In the 1980s, the Walt Disney Company got involved and we started seeing some interesting and questionable displays. But we got our first glimpse of halftime shows to come in '93 when none other than Michael Jackson stunned fans with his 15-minute medley of his own smash hits. When he walked out on stage, he had to wait for the crowd's cheers to die down for about 2 minutes before even starting his first song. Diana Ross, Gloria Estefan, Phil Collins all starred in their own shows, as did Aerosmith, who performed alongside NSYNC. Things got a little bit out of hand in 2004 when Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson produced perhaps the most famous or infamous wardrobe malfunction in history. Shows from the likes of Prince, Lady Gaga and Beyoncé are considered by critics as the best. To give you an idea of the scale of things, Rihanna's 2023 halftime show included roughly 800 people. These ranged from backing dancers to stage crew to camera operatives broadcasting to millions around the world. The whole stage for that show was built in roughly 8 minutes and was broken down and cleared away in the same time. The acts perform for free nowadays, even though the experts reckon it costs around $13 million to put on Rihanna's show. Artists know they'll rocket up the charts in the following weeks. Rihanna's average sales improved by 140% in the months following her performance. The Super Bowl halftime show will be a fixture in pop culture for years to come. So the question is, who next?
Yeah, still 60 minutes to go of tonight's edition of Trans-Europe Express. Welcome to all of that. I'm Danny Kelly. With me, as so very often, shall we say always, for the sake of accuracy, Andy Brassell. Lots to get through in the next 60 minutes. We'll be talking about everything that's been happening in France, including a rare defeat for PSG. We'll also be looking at the Europa and Conference League games coming up on Thursday. Those are round of 16s, of course, and they include games for Celtic, Nottingham Forest and Crystal Palace, and we'll talk about those. Andy will take you around the leagues as well, and of course we'll be joined, as so very often, by Tim Vickery, live from South America. Welcome one, welcome all, bienvenue, Bolcha, willkommen to every one of you. It's the last hour of Trans-Europe Express. Yes, let's go to South America now, to Tim Vickery in Brazil, where no doubt he's got a thick head, having celebrated Brazil's first ever gold medal at the Winter Olympics. Hi, Tim.
Yes, carnival on ice. There were tears in the commentary box when it happened. Not a joke, not a novelty at all. It was taken very, very seriously. We're in the middle of
the men's supergiant slalom. I should make the point the lad is of Norwegian and Brazilian extraction, has chosen to ski for Brazil. What a fantastic thing it was to see.
Yeah, he's always represented Norway, and he kind of grew up in Norway. He fell out with Norway a couple of years ago. Lucas Pinheiro.
Retired.
I think. Yes, retired and came back at the age of 25. But it seems there's much more of a kind of swaggering individualism around him that perhaps fits in better with Brazilian culture than it does with the more subdued Scandinavian collectivism. Anyway, Brazil have adopted him. He speaks a language. He dates a Brazilian actress. He's immersing himself in Brazilian-ness, as is Carlo Ancelotti. Carlo Ancelotti's agenda over the next few days is all about carnival. Restricted, of course, to executive boxes and so on. But he's been up in Salvador, the biggest carnival of the northeast. He'll be down in Rio as well. We'll be visiting Sao Paulo, to the surprise of many. They do have a carnival there. And the people behind this, I think he probably wants to do it anyway. You know, he does love discovering the cultural specificity. No, I can't say that. Let's give that one up. The cultural aspects. Well done, well done. You're a better man than I. The cultural aspects of the places where he lives. But the people who've put together this agenda to Brazilianise the culture of the national team. It's one of the sponsors. It's a brewery. So liquor manufacturers are garnishing the fruits, Danny Kelly.
Well, what does Carnival hold for you then, Tim?
Well, quite a lot of work, actually, because the football calendar is just absolutely unrelentless. The parade, I have done it a few times. Always, I know my station in life, always in the second division, because it's taken very, very seriously. I remember the first time I did it, I got a freebie, and it was a school that were giving a tribute. The theme, there's always a theme. Every school chooses a theme. It was the centenary of Fluminense Football Club, and I knew people there, so they gave me a freebie, so I came along and paraded. The school really didn't deserve very good luck because they'd chosen the wrong year. They hadn't even got the centenary right. But I said, if you give me this freebie, I'm going to put so much effort in. I guarantee I'm going to get you out of the second division. And I very, very nearly succeeded because we came very, very close to being relegated to the third.
Tim, talking of Fluminense, John Arias is back in Brazil. Not everyone's happy about it, is it fair to say?
No, he's walked into a storm there. That short spell at Wolves, not his fault. It was probably wrong club, wrong time. And he never imagined it would be so short, 7 or 8 months, because when he left, it was Fluminense where he became a star. And he didn't need to say these things. He didn't need to say it, but he said it. He said, with me, it's not about the money. It's not about the money. If I will come back to Brazil, and the only club I will dream of representing is Fluminense. And here he is joining Palmeiras. What has happened? Well, as he's tried to go on football on social media and explain himself, football is a very dynamic process. And when he said this, he imagined he'd be coming back in 3 or 4 years as a free agent. Instead of which, with the World Cup looming and Wolves in crisis, he's decided that he needed to go back quickly. So someone had to come up with a transfer fee, and Palmeiras are one of the big two in current Brazilian football, so they're the ones who could do the deal and give him a very good team to slot into. So as a famous person once said, I've never been hurt by words I didn't say. Arias is probably regretting those words at the moment, and when he comes to Rio to represent Palmeiras against Fluminense, he will have to prepare himself for an almighty jeer from the terraces.
The Copa del Rey is up and running, Tim. We know that in recent years it's been, I'm going to use a word here from a distance, predictable because of the big Brazilian clubs. So it needs a kind of shot in the arm. And according to your notes, there's some good starts to this by debutant clubs.
Yeah, we got 5 debutants in this year, a couple from Argentina, one from Brazil. But we're in the very first stage of the qualifying rounds, which has 3 stages. And the other 2 debutants were there. And it was kind of expected that these 2 debutants, small clubs from outside the capital cities of their respective countries, it's quite rare in a lot of South American football because it's very centralised. It was expected that they would waddle on, have their 15 minutes of fame and then return to the obscurity which they so richly deserve. But no, both of them have made it through to live again to the second round. One is a team from Paraguay called the Dos de Mayo, the 2nd of May. Why so many teams are named after dates, I have absolutely no idea. They were up against Alianza Lima of Peru, a big club who last year eliminated Argentine giants Boca Juniors in the qualifying round. The Paraguayans with traditional Paraguayan grit, they won 1-0 at home and managed to scrape a draw away, so they go through. They go through to live again. The other one, Juventud from Uruguay, Juventud de las Pedras, from kind of the outskirts of Montevideo, with a squad which now includes Martin Cáceres. Remember him? Once of Southampton, I think, very, very briefly, but he's only on the bench at the moment. They were up against not huge opposition, Universidad Católica of Ecuador, but there's the altitude factor there. And Católica won in Uruguay. The Juventud of Uruguay, they had to go up the mountain to Quito and win there, and they weren't winning until deep into stoppage time at the end of the second half, when they got the goal that forced it to penalties, and they then came through that penalty shootout. So this gives these 2 clubs the next 2 weeks of Libertadores action, when they can keep the story running, and who knows, dream about getting over this stage as well, and then if they get through the third stage, they're in the group phase proper.
Tim, 3 games into the Brazilian League season, a coach has been fired already, yes?
Indeed, yes. I'll give you 2 guesses who it might be, but you won't need the second one when I tell you that it is Jorge Sampaoli. Remember him? Little Argentine. Yes. Yeah, and he's been sacked by Atletico Mineiro. And as I'm sure you can imagine, it has much, much more to do with his behaviour than it does with the results. The 3 games of the Brazilian Championship, they've drawn 2 and lost 1, so that's not totally disastrous. Also going on are the regional games, their championship there in the state of Minas Gerais. I think they played 7 in there before he was sacked, and they're unbeaten, but drawn 5, so only 2 wins. But he spends his whole time, he's got to be moaning at someone. I'm sure when he's left on his own, he just moans at the mirror. And he's been moaning away at, I need reinforcement, always speaking Spanish. You know, he's worked here in lots of different clubs. He's never made the slightest concession to the language. I need reinforcements. It's not good enough. I need more reinforcements. And then he gets some reinforcements and says, well, these aren't the reinforcements that I want. I want other reinforcements. So he goes as far as he can to turn his work environment unsustainable, and he has become the first coach in the Brazilian Championship, which will be the first of many to receive his P45.
Yeah, well, you told us at the start of the season that the race would be on to be the first one sacked within 5 games, and you're absolutely right. Now, I say this with a sigh because I think Brazil have got a lot of very talented footballers, and if they can sort themselves out in midfield, I think, given the temperature and things like that, they're a good dark horse for the upcoming World Cup. Whoever thought we'd be reduced to calling Brazil a dark horse, by the way? But so it's with a deep sigh that I say Neymar's back and looking to go to the World Cup with Brazil.
Yeah, he's expected to make his comeback. He hasn't played this year after a minor knee operation in about 15 minutes' time in a game that Santos are playing in the state championship. And it really is a race against time. If he's going to get in the squad for next month's friendlies against France and Croatia, it looks as if he's only going to have, after tonight, he's only going to have 3 games in which to do it. That isn't very much to prove to Carlo Ancelotti, who has deliberately set the bar as high as possible, to prove to Ancelotti that he's worthy of a place. But this story is not going to go away. Ancelotti, in his roamings around Brazilian Carnival, is hearing people yell, call up Neymar, recall Neymar at him. And I saw one of the class of, it might have been Denilson, World Cup winner in 2002, was saying, Neymar on one leg is better than anyone else that we've got. It's extraordinary. I mean, he hasn't really played top-class football since October of 2023. He's attempted to come back. He didn't do very much last year. But it is amazing the esteem in which he's held. We will find out over these next few games and up to the middle or late May when the World Cup squad is called up. We will find out if he has what it takes, because Ancelotti is not going to be persuaded, I think, by past records. You know, it's a kind of what have you done for anyone lately type approach. And this narrative is not going to go away, and I'm going to thoroughly enjoy keeping you updated on how Neymar is doing over the next few weeks and months.
It's unfortunate for Neymar, if you want to look at it that way, who Brazil got in as their manager, because almost any other manager in world football would be under pressure, because if Brazil don't do well, then you're going to get crucified for not taking him. Look, probably one of a handful of managers in the whole global game who could say, I'm rising above that because of what I've done in the game, and because of my personal track record. One of those is Carlo Ancelotti.
Yeah, although it's a little bit like Scolari when they won the World Cup the last time in 2002 with Romario, because there was this huge campaign to get Romario back. Scolari had inherited Romario as his captain when he took over in the middle of 2001. I remember it because I was there. And they had, you know, the players have to come down and meet the press and so on. And one player didn't come down. The team captain, Romario. Whoa. So Scolari's already thinking, well, I don't really think he's on board. And then they had a Copa America where they were going to take a weakened side, but it was really important to kind of get something going there. And Romario decided not to play. So he kind of burnt his bridges, and Scolari went ahead and organised a team without him. And then I remember vividly Romario calling a press conference to try and get back in. And it was a little bit like Danny DeVito in Tin Men. I don't know if you've ever seen that wonderful film.
Sure.
He offered a full and complete apology for everything. He couldn't remember doing anything wrong, but whatever it was, he wanted to apologise. Yeah, it didn't get him on the plane, and Brazil went ahead and won the World Cup without him.
Well, I suspect, I don't know. Why would I not defer to the opinion of Danielson? He's won the World Cup, you know. But the idea that he's better than anybody else that Brazil could put out on that pitch, when I look down the possible forwards that Brazil might be parading, I think is too, if I may be so bold, Mr. Danielson, fanciful. Listen, Tim, thank you very much indeed for the last 15 minutes with all the latest from South America. Next, we'll be looking at France, where, as I say, and I don't want no spoilers, PSG lost.
Thomas Tuchel signing a contract, is it because of the fact that the FA were concerned he was going to go somewhere else?
Listen, I think it is. You know, I certainly think he was on Manchester United's list. Who knows, maybe he would have been on Tottenham's list as well. And I think that's why they had to get this done, because what you don't want, if you're the FA, and if you're an England fan, you don't want Thomas Tuchel going into the World Cup with constant speculation that he could be leaving for a Premier League club job at the end of the tournament. I think getting that out of the way, he can focus on the job in hand. I don't think England will win the World Cup. I think there's a lot that counts against England winning this World Cup.
What happens if we lose in the quarterfinals? Does he continue as England manager?
I think I don't think we should underestimate if he gets to the quarterfinal of a World Cup. When you go back pre-Gareth Southgate, which is your argument, We'd have bitten your hand off at the quarterfinal of a World
Are you
Cup.
going to defend me on that?
No, I'll defend you because I think Gareth Southgate should have won a European Championship. I think they should have beaten Italy in that final. However, pre-Gareth Southgate, England didn't get to quarterfinals and finals at European Championships. So I don't, and it's a tough draw, by the way. You talk about draws. I was there when the draw was made in Washington. England have got to take out some big hitters to get to a quarterfinal.
So where does he have to get to keep his job done?
I think the quarterfinal is par. I think anything beyond that.
Yeah, listen, after the departure of Chelsea's Director of Women's Football, Paul Green, is there a cause for concern for Chelsea women? Leanne Sanderson reflects on a rollercoaster few weeks for Sonia Bompasta's side, plus Brentford women's manager Carly Williams joins us to discuss how the women's team are hoping to emulate the success of their male counterparts. All that and more on talkSPORT's Women's Football Show, Monday night at 10 p.m. on talkSPORT 2 or wherever you get your podcasts. So, Andy, an unusual return to France now, an unusual circumstance in that Paris Saint-Germain do not lose very many domestic matches. I mean, certainly they don't lose many domestic matches and then find their Ballon d'Or winner lashing out all around him. But our headline is Dembele dishes the dirt. So tell us about that.
Yeah, that's right. So they surprisingly went down 3-1 at currently managerless Rennes on Friday night. Now, we know who the successor to Abid Bey, as we said earlier, is going to be for Rennes. But while the Abid Bey versus Rennes legal wrangling takes place, Francaise cannot yet take the job. So they're officially managerless. Rennes were terrific on the night, by the way. PSG had the chances to get something out of it. Now, we talked earlier about the dispute between Brice Samba and Abid Bey. He was dropped for Bey's last game, Samba, came back in, and at 2-1 made an absolutely fantastic double save from Gonzalo Ramos, and the third goal from Bril Mbolo saw Rennes home after that. But Ousmane Dembele, of course, returning to the place which launched his football career before he went to Dortmund, exploded his teammates, and he called them out for effort, for concentration, for focus, all those sort of things, with the rest of the season in mind, and of course with that big game away at Monaco in the Champions League happening this week. And so this was overheard by the cameras and put afterwards in the tunnel and put afterwards to Luis Enrique. Now, Luis Enrique wanted to be so clear, he switched out of his slightly stilting French and said, look, I'm going to say this in Spanish so you understand every word of what I'm saying. And he said, anything that a player says after a game means nothing. Absolutely nothing. There are no problems. That's it. And walked. And the fact is, though, for Ousmane Dembele, who's been in great form again at the start of this calendar year, to let a load of frustration go, it kind of gives the impression that PSG are falling a little bit short. Of course, the defeat says that. Of course, the fact that Lens, having won the following day, are now top of the league, says that. But it does show you not just how brilliant they are, but how fragile it all is as well, going into this money stretch of the season.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to do a bit of French football history for you here, Andy, and I know you're going to sit there going, what? Oh, no, this can't work. But I suspect it's the first time in a very, 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 very long time that both the Paris sides lost in the same weekend in a top in the top level of French football, because you're right to say that Lens, following that defeat for PSG, went top, but they did so by absolutely whacking Paris FC.
Yeah, I don't know if we've yet got the verb to marmalise in French, but it is fair to say that PFC were marmalisés by Lens this weekend, who were brilliant, really. Another couple of goals from Wesley Said, who had a brilliant first half, and it was like the most one-way of one-way traffic. Another assist for Alain Saint-Maximin after he came on as sub. And it's one thing, Rennes getting one over PSG on the Friday night. Lens had the pressure of having to take advantage of that, and they went and did that in the most emphatic style possible. And Pierre Sarge, their brilliant coach, who we can never heap enough praise on, he was saying earlier this week that he feels more pressure at Lens than actually he did at Lyon, because he said at Lyon, I was just like the guy out of the academy who was just filling a post, whereas now I've been invited to this job at this huge club, Lens, which is so passionately followed, and people are expecting something from me for the first time, and they're certainly getting it. Whatever happens next, the fact that they are top of the league with 12 games left, it is an extraordinary story.
Yeah, and I mean, look, we shouldn't expect anything except a PSG victory. Everything says it. The history, the ridiculous amount of money with which they dominate the French league. But they have got their eyes on other things as well, including defending their Champions League title. I mean, a daft question for someone who follows French football as closely as you, Andy. Does it, I mean, not just does it need a challenge every now and then to PSG, but what would be the effect, given that French football was trying to sell itself, the terrible troubles they've had with their TV deals and all the rest of it, what would it mean in the unlikely still event of Lens winning the title?
Well, I think, firstly, that whatever happens next, that it looks competitive. And Lens, of course, are the outstanding example of that. But you think Lyon, who, if we go back to June, they were to all intents and purposes a Ligue 2 club because of their financial problems. And now
we'll talk about them next as well, yeah.
Yeah, in the week that they've moved on from John Textor, more definitively still, a 13th successive win in all competitions, putting them in third, putting them between PSG and Marseille. It feels like there is something happening. Now, whether it's sustainable, there are more concerns over the TV deal this week, because after beIN Sports gazumped Ligue 1 Plus for the rights to the World Cup this summer, the guy who's in charge of Ligue 1 Plus, Nicolas de Tavernost, or LFP Media, which is the company behind that, has had a huff and resigned. So there's a part TV crisis happening again. But in terms of the most important thing, like there actually being a product worth watching, it's been a great season so far.
Yeah, and let me just ask you then, because you've mentioned Lyon's victory over Nice, 13 wins on a spin. In any league, at any level, that is some pretty good going. Who's your star of the week in France, Andy?
My star of the week is going to be from Le Havre, who, again, have been a great story this season. Now, it wasn't looking good for them. Home to Toulouse this afternoon. Their captain sent off 2 minutes into the game, Aruma Sangante, 2 minutes in. So they're a man down for 88 minutes plus stoppages. But the man who got the armband from Sangante, Issa Soumare, real captain's role from him, scored twice and they won 2-1. 2 brilliant finishes from him as well.
Okay, well, listen, my star of the week, Sunderland fans will have a familiar name here, Simon Ndingwa, who is on loan from Sunderland to Monaco. Monaco, have been struggling. Well, Ndingwa got 2 goals in 3 minutes as Monaco beat Nantes on Friday night. That was only their second win in 8, Monaco, and they were the first goals that Simon Ndingwa has managed since his loan move to the south of France. But that's good enough to make him my star of the week. Next up, we'll be looking at those fixtures on Thursday in the Europa League and the Europa Conference, particularly as they pertain to the English and Scottish teams left in those tournaments. You're listening to Trans Europe Express.
you know, when you walk into Tottenham, what you see everywhere is to dare is to do. It's everywhere. And yet their actions are almost the antithesis of that. Right. It's a real curious in terms of understanding what are they trying to build? You know, what are they? Is it... There's obviously, they've built an unbelievable stadium, unbelievable training facilities. But when you look at the expenditure, particularly, you know, in their wages structure, they're not a big club. I saw that because when we were trying to sign players, we weren't in the market for those players.
I was stunned. I was absolutely... I thought it was disgraceful.
Did you?
I thought, honestly, I couldn't believe what I was listening to. The club have given him £7 million. He's blaming everyone but himself.
No, we got him a trophy.
Yes, but for his sacking, he's blaming everyone. But when I sat down on the day of the final, Daniel Levy comes up to me and goes, I've been in 8 semi-finals and final, and we all laughed.
Yeah, what's wrong with that? That's his fault.
I don't want to know that. That should be private.
No.
He's giving you Honestly, he didn't blame himself. Did he ever say, I wasn't that good?
No. No, but
let me tell you now, if you're listening, Ange, I know you won't, but if you're listening, the reason you were the worst Spurs manager in 50 years.
Most successful in the last 20.
And the reason you got the
Is he the most successful in the last 20?
Yeah, but I've already told you why, right?
No, but is he?
Not in the league, no. All I'm saying is league.
So, Andy, the way that these European tournaments work, and we has discussed a lot in the last hour of Trans-Europe Express, the Champions League is at the qualification stage. It's for the last 16. Meanwhile, the Europa League and the Conference League, I suppose to try and fit in all these fixtures, already arrived after just 6 matches in their leagues at the round of 16 stage. Let's talk about some of the ties, particularly those involving British clubs. Let's start with a Scottish club. Celtic, who find themselves back in the race for the Scottish title. A very late winner today at Kilmarnock, followed by Rangers' victory over Hearts, means that it's now a real proper 3-way race for the title north of the border. They go to Stuttgart, and, you know, a few weeks ago I'd have said this was a very difficult tie, and I still do think it's a difficult tie, for Celtic. Actually, the game's in Glasgow, isn't it?
Yeah.
But Martin O'Neill's arrival has at least brought some spirit and some spark to their squad.
It has, and we talked earlier about Atletico doing well to have the second leg at home in their particular tie. I think it suits Celtic very well to play the first game at Celtic Park because they've got the opportunity to make it difficult for Stuttgart from the off. Stuttgart very, very strong at home. So to be able to potentially go to Swabia with something, I think is really important. But look, we've heard a lot of talk about Stuttgart this week because of their coach, Sebastian Hoeneß, who is, I think, some people's dream candidate for the Tottenham job. I understand why. I think you could make an argument, with all due respect to Vincent Kompany, that Sebastian Hoeneß is the best coach in Germany at the moment. He's great. And his teams play really aggressive attacking football. Now, particularly at the moment, bear in mind they lost Nick Waltemada last summer. You go back before that and they lose Seru Guirassy. You know, they've lost some incredible players. The Stuttgart team you could make up of the players they've sold in the last 3 or 4 years is something. But at the moment, they've got Emedin Demirovic, who's leading the line very well. Just behind him, Denis Undav, Jamie Leveling on one side, who's been the subject of a lot of Premier League interest, and Chris Furyk on the other. That's one heck of a front four. I think it's going to be super hard for Celtic. You know, player for player, Stuttgart are a lot better than them. And you have to say, despite recent improvements and the work of Danny Roll and Martin O'Neill, which you have to respect, these are not vintage Celtic and Rangers sides by any stretch of the imagination. Celtic will find this hard.
The other tie I think is really fascinating me, again, in the Europa League, is that between Fenerbahce and Nottingham Forest. Andy, I managed to tell you something you didn't know. The last time an Angelos Marinakis side had 4 managers in the same season was when Olympiacos won the Europa League, or the conference, wasn't it? The Conference League.
That's a great fact.
Yeah, so he obviously thinks, I've done it before, I'm going to do it again. And there's a part of me that thinks that Nottingham Forest would be do themselves a favour by getting out of this tournament. But that's not the way he's thinking, presumably. And again, having the second leg on the banks of the Trent gives them some advantage here, though it is possible, sorry Forest fans, they could get wiped out here in Fenerbahce, couldn't they?
Well, but potentially. I mean, it depends on the team they put out. I mean, I tend to think that despite their domestic imperatives, Forest have got a good enough squad to get away from relegation danger and to have a good go at this. Now, Forest fans who've waited a long time for them to come back in the Premier League and been part of a few relegation scrapes would probably say, yeah, okay, not for my heart, thank you very much. And I totally understand and respect that. But I think you look at Nottingham Forest and you look at not just their European history, their noble European history, but really the strength of English clubs in competitions of this size. I still think they can give it a good go. And of course, this is Vitor Pereira going to his old club. So he's not just going to turn up and play the reserves. I find that very, very hard to imagine, indeed, especially as in previous spells at Fenerbahce. Remember, he was their coach twice. He spent quite a bit of his time rowing with the crowd there. So, he's not a backwards and going forwards kind of fella. I think it's going to be a really interesting tie. And I'm looking forward to the second leg in particular. Fenerbahce in good nick at the moment, which we'll touch on in other leagues as well.
Plus, Andy, let's not pretend there's not a political element to all of this. If Angelos Marinakis' team were to get walloped by a Turkish team, they'd be onto their 5th manager pretty quick this season. I think it's fair to say. Let's talk about then in the Conference League. Crystal Palace having a turbulent sort of season in some ways, losing important players either to injury, as it turns out, with a centre forward, or to transfer in the case of Mark Gay, who you discussed a little earlier in the show. They, though, ought to have enough to go very, very deep into the Conference League. They should be favourites to win it. Let's be truthful about that. They go to Bosnia to play Zrinjski Mostar. Now, I am a pretty big fan of Eastern European football, particularly how it came through communism and all the rest of it. But Zrinjski Mostar, for Palace fans to understand this, are not even the big team in Mostar.
No, well, not if we're going way back to the former Yugoslavia. Of course, Velez Mostar, who I used to think featured into the lyrics of "Wind of Change" by the Scorpions, but that was just my hearing. In actual fact, they're such a historic club. But Zrinjski are the clubs who, since Yugoslavia split and Bosnia has
no pun intended
had its own Premier League. Yeah, exactly. And Bosnia has had its own Premier League. That they have been the dominant club in it and are ever present as well. The other thing we have to underline about them is Igor Stimac, formerly of Derby and West Ham, is the current coach there, which is an interesting little twist. So I'm sure he'll have a tale or two to tell in the build up to this. But yeah, I'm really interested to see where Palace place this in their priorities. Now, we talked about Forest and how they can maybe find the balance between doing what they need to do at home and getting themselves in a position to really compete for a European trophy. And obviously Palace have a few more points, but it's not an entirely dissimilar situation. I think it's fair to say, especially after the rough couple of months that Palace have had. But Palace fans have waited forever for this European campaign, so to play it to the absolute end is so important. And would be great for them, especially with the heartache they went of being dropped down from the Europa League, which they would have been contenders for, by the way. Let's underline that again.
Sure.
The biggest threats to them for me are Strasbourg, and Gary O'Neill's got himself a fantastic opportunity to compete for a European trophy. They've been really good since he came in, and they've come out of that rough patch that ended the Liam Rosignol period. They're excellent at Marseille at the weekend, and despite the fact they needed a 96-minute goal to draw, that they well deserved that. They didn't steal it at all. And then you've got Shakhtar, who are replete with quality Brazilian talent, young Brazilian talent, who among them could be some of the stars of the future. So it feels like a more competitive Conference League than it's been for the last couple of years, and certainly than it was when Chelsea were holding all before them.
I may have confused people. Both these leagues have slightly less games, and then they go into another. This is a qualifying round for the round of 16. When the draw was made, Andy, I don't know if you were here for that. I think I said it last week. The most Andy-type game here is a tie between Ludogorets and Ferencváros. But Ferencváros been in the news lately because, of course, Robbie Keane is doing well there as a manager. Enough that people asked him, would you go to Spurs to be an interim manager? And he walked away from the microphone in tremendously high dudgeon.
Yeah, you have to enjoy that. And I think as well, what we have to bear in mind is that the way football has been used in Hungary in recent years. So we might think of Hungarian football as something from the past, something from the 50s, 60s and 70s. And
critical to the development of the world game, though, is fair to say, yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. But I think in modern terms, people might think of it as a footballing backwater. However, that would be to overlook how it's been used as a tool under the reign of Viktor Orban, where he has invested so much money into Hungarian football. So for Robbie Keane to go there, and it's not just getting managerial experience, there is an imperative to win. And especially for a club with their sort of history, with their sort of name. So he's under the sort of pressure. And it makes me think, when he's been mentioned with the Celtic job, why he's someone who would fit that quite well. I mean, maybe Tottenham is a bit too much of a leap, but I could see him at, say, Celtic in future, the sort of club where you're expected to win week after week after week, and where you're the name on football supporters' lips all over the country.
Of course, he played for them as well. We should never forget that.
Yeah.
Finally, in the conference, Andy, perhaps surprisingly, not among, maybe because of the season they're having, not among the automatic qualifiers for the round of 16, Fiorentina. But things are changing there with their new director of football working for both Spurs and Fiorentina in the transfer window. They brought in a whole raft of new players. Yeah, sorry, allegedly, yes, yeah. They brought in a whole raft of new players. They start to pick up a little bit in Serie A. Could they be late contenders? Could they be late rivals to Crystal Palace for this title?
Maybe. I mean, you're looking at 2 finals and a semi-final in the last 3 seasons, so it's their competition to a greater or lesser extent. For them, of course, it is about getting out of relegation trouble, and they were in the bottom 3 until winning Como this weekend. But I think we can talk about players that have come in, Danny. Really, what has been the main thing for Fiorentina in recent weeks is the players who were already there showing up and being the players that they should and could have been in the first half of the season and weren't for a number of reasons, so to do with form and fitness, etc., etc. So Moise Kean starting the games consistently and scoring the goals. He scored the winner at Como. David De Gea being important. Robin Gosens, who interestingly could have gone to Nottingham Forest in this transfer window and said, no, I'm going to stay here and keep this club in Serie A. There's something that really, really matters. That's something that really, really matters to them. But of course, this competition is an itch that they definitely need to scratch. They've got the squad to cope for it, like some of the other big teams that we talked about that are in this competition. But it's going to be a very competitive tie against Jagiellonia Białystok, who were really, really good in the league phase.
Listen, we've got 2 big ties for you. Live commentaries here on talkSPORT on Thursday. Actually, over on talkSPORT 2, 6:15 in the evening, that game in Turkey between Fenerbahce and Nottingham Forest. Alex Crook and Luke Chambers, the former Forest defender, will bring you that one. And then at 8 o'clock, it's that huge game between Celtic and Stuttgart. and the commentators are Ian Danter and the former Scotland striker Chris Uwelemo. So more European football for you over on talkSPORT 2 on Thursday evening. Very soon, though, Andy will take you around the remaining big stories from the remaining leagues in Europe as we head towards the finishing line here on Trans-Europe Express.
Arsenal all his life, and I just want to say that I fear for Arsenal again because I genuinely believe that Mikel Arteta sets out his team not to lose.
Agreed.
Not to lose. Whereas Man City set out to win. And I don't know how you win something by setting out not to lose. And this is a problem we have every year. We get towards the end, and he thinks that by not losing, getting a draw will be all right. But every time you draw now and the other team wins, you drop 2 points in the Premier League. Yep. And so he's got a tried and tested method of failing. And if my reasons for believing that are, first of all, I've never believed he's going to get us over the line after his first full season. If you look back, I believe there was a moment. There was 8 games left to play. Arsenal were in 4th place. We were 5 points clear of the team in 5th, and we had a game in hand, and we still managed to finish 5th. And every season since then has been the same.
That was when you went to Newcastle and lost.
As I say, heading towards the finishing line here now on Trans-Europe Express, which means, as traditionally, Andy takes us around some of the other things that have been happening in the leagues that we like to cover. Starting, Andy, with a huge game in Portugal that went on. I know Portuguese games go on to the middle of the night anyway because they start so late in the evening, but this one had the added bonus of a load of added time on as well.
Yeah, I do wonder how Radamel Falcao survived out there in his pomp. I do remember when they had 11 p.m. kickoffs in Sunday night in La Liga, and him being asked after the game what effect that had on him, and him saying, "Well, it's past my bedtime for a start,"
yeah.
which is not ideal. But yeah, we had Porto versus Sporting on Monday night, a potential season decider really, and it looked like it was going to be that way because it looked like we were going to go back to Porto having a 7-point lead at the top. Of course, they'd lost their previous game, their first league game of the season at Casa Pia, a real shock result the previous week, which was perfectly set up for this Classico. It was pretty gritty, no quarter Arsenal given, not many chances created. Seko Fofana, who's recently arrived at Porto, came on and scored on his debut to put them in front. And to keep it going and keep the gap at 4 points, Luis Suarez, the Colombian Luis Suarez, got his umpteenth goal of the season in the 10th minute of stoppage time after his penalty was saved by Diogo Costa, and we've all had a penalty saved by Diogo Costa, haven't we? He put in the rebound, and with the last kick of the game, Sporting got their equaliser. But Sporting were not happy afterwards about a number of issues of instances of gamesmanship that they talked about.
Andy, this is just amazing what you're about to tell people. Listen up, everybody. I know it's late at night. Open your ears now. Bless you all and listen carefully.
So one of them, the one that was the most obvious to everyone watching, was that, you know, the multi-ball system where you have the cones on which the balls sit around the pitch.
Yeah.
Well, as we went into stoppage time, the Porto ball boys, it seems, were instructed, or maybe they all had the same idea at the same time. Who knows? Porto haven't commented, so we don't know. Removed the cones and then moved all the extra balls behind the advertising hoardings. So we had TV footage and photos of piles of balls stacked up behind the advertising boarding to stop Sporting, presumably, getting on with the game quickly. Although, obviously, this didn't stop them scoring the late equaliser. Sporting were furious about this, and rightly so. They had a number of other complaints of varying merit. One of them was that the urinals in the away dressing room had above each of them a cover of a sports newspaper of one of Porto's greatest triumphs. Although Porto have claimed that they decorated the away dressing rooms in September, so every visitor this season has had to put up with that. Going back to the African Cup of Nations, Rui Silva, the Sporting goalkeeper. It was a very rainy night in Porto. He kept having his towel nicked from the side of the goal for drying his gloves on as well. This is going to rumble and rumble and rumble. Porto, in riposte, have complained about the behaviour of Sporting captain Morten Hjulmand. Not in this game, in the previous game, which they weren't involved in.
Listen,
which is interesting.
I mean, obviously, when you hear about that level of housery, I mean, Jose Mourinho must just be beside himself that he's not involved. How dare they?
He must be so annoyed. He fell out badly with Andre Villas-Boas once. And people are suggesting that Porto have become a little more, playing the percentages since AVB became president. So, who knows? Maybe that's Mourinho's next step, become president of a club.
Yeah, one last thing about that game. Terrible news for Porto, and really, I suspect bad news for Spain in the upcoming World Cup. Samu Agahawa, probably 90 million euros worth of centre forward, if a Premier League comes knocking for him, has suffered an ACL injury. And obviously the stress of modern football, and the ACLs are going more and more commonly, and that's going to have to be looked at as well. Training, pitches, medication, and the match playing, because we're seeing so many good footballers just going down with these ACL injuries now. Tell us about Turkey, and for fans of the show, long-term fans of the show, a little bit of an update of Icardi watch.
Yes, absolutely. Well, look, he's a bit like the Turkish Super League Dayo Upamecano. Well, come on, he's bigger than that, isn't he? We want to see him sign this new contract at Galatasaray, don't we?
Yes,
even
totally.
With a pay cut. So they beat Eyüpspor on Friday night, which meant that at the end of the weekend, they still have a 3-point lead at the top, Galatasaray. That's after Fenerbahce went and won an absolutely cracking game at third place Trabzonspor, 3-2 on Saturday night. Marco Asensio scored the winner, and he was absolutely brilliant again, even though Trabzonspor had the best of the game. And that flag in it for Nottingham Forest fans is why Fenerbahce are a danger, because the leader of their team really is one of the guys who was one of the best players in the Premier League in the second half of last season. Asensio, he was fantastic for Villa. Mauro Icardi scored this hat-trick on Friday night, and then the fans who adore him at the worst of times pulled out this massive banner of one of his famous recent quotes as he gets ready to, hopefully for them and everyone involved, sign a new contract, which said, and it was written in Spanish as well, Icardi's language, it said, "Galatasaray is not part of my career. Galatasaray is part of my life." And this is why it's so important for them to sign him again, because Icardi is not just a big star. He's not just a goal scorer. He's a cultural figure who's really bought into the club, and he's really bought into Turkish football. And that's why people want him to stay. And he's shown, I think, his commitment to staying, because he's properly fit now. Not just fit as in not having an ACL injury anymore, but fit as in he looks lean, he looks motivated. And interestingly, this is the first time since he's properly fit that he's played alongside Victor Osimhen. Now, whether, as we said before, they'll be brave enough to do that in the game against Juventus, and whether Okan Buruk decides that's the right thing to do in the game against Juventus, I think will be really interesting. We have to have a little word for a German coach who's lost his job as well. Thomas Reis, formerly a Schalke player, he saw Samsunspor into third place last season, which is incredible. They're still in the Conference League, of course, not a big name of Turkish football. So they were going to reward him with a new contract. And then he started looking at the detail of the new contract, and it said, right, well, if you want to get paid for all of this, you have to finish in the top 6 every season. And he said, well, that's a bit unrealistic. We haven't got the budget. And they said, oh, maybe you should leave at the end of the season then. And then 2 defeats down the line, they just sacked him.
And you've got literally 1 minute to tell us about football in the Netherlands, including right at the end there, or indeed after the transfer window closed, one of the more, unpredictable transfers from the Premier League to Holland.
Yeah, that's right. Raheem Sterling going to Feyenoord, of course, not fit enough to make his debut yet. They were quite fortunate to beat 10-man go-ahead Eagles this weekend. But I'm really interested to see how this goes. Now, the rumour in the Netherlands is that Ajax were also offered him, but they said €250 a game, pay as you play, no thanks. We'll pass on that. But I really hope it works out for Sterling. You know, such an important player in English football in the last decade. The thing that concerns me a little bit is he's tied his future very much to that of Robin van Persie. He said Van Persie was the key figure in making him sign. And Van Persie, of course, is under massive pressure at the moment, with Feyenoord's form tanking over the last couple of months.
Yeah, PSV actually lost as well, but they're still 14 points clear, which takes us to the end of this evening's show. Andy, thank you very much indeed for all that you've done. Thank you all for listening. In our poll, just about most of you, just a majority think De Zerbi might end up at Spurs. Meanwhile, coming up next here on talkSPORT, how to win the World Cup. But till then, until next week with myself and Andy, God bless you all and good night.
irony is, I think Arteta is one of the best managers to grace the Premier League for a long time. I think if anyone can, and I just think we just need to play.
Sorry, say that again. What did you say? Just say that Arteta's one of the greatest managers to ever come into the Premier League.
Yeah, can you not hear this evening?
But what are you on about? He ain't won that. He ain't won nothing.
No, but you know he's a young manager. Wenger came second 3 years on the trot, and then he won the league. You got to give these guys time.